Weekly Stuff podcast with Jonathan Lack
and Sean Chapman.
We are here to talk about stuff. This week on the show, we are talking about Sonic the Hedgehog 2. Not the new movie opening in theaters this week. We'll talk about that a little because I actually did go see it. I don't think Sean did.
No, I like Sonic the Hedgehog, but I also just don't make a habit of going and seeing movies that much at the movie theater these days.
That's okay. We'll talk about the movie a little bit, but the main topic this week actually is about Sonic the Hedgehog 2, the video game from the 1990s. I forget what year exactly. Is Sonic 2 93, 92?
2 days before I was born, November 21st, 1992.
Oh, wow. Okay, so it's a 1992 game. It is as old as both of us then.
Yes, it is very, very easy for me to remember the release date of Sonic the Hedgehog 2.
It is 2 days older than you and about 1 month younger than me.
Yes.
So Sonic the Hedgehog 2 has been with us our whole lives. We replayed it for the podcast this week, and, I just realized, hey, this is a good opportunity to talk about a classic video game that we've never really gone in depth on. Other than a little bit when Sonic Mania came out, we would have talked about it for where it is in Sonic Mania. But I had a lot of fun revisiting it this week, Sean, and I'm excited to talk about it.
Yeah, it's like one of the best video game sequels ever.
Yes.
So, it was fun to... and I played it on a Genesis emulator on my new Nintendo 2DS XL that is, like, hacked open and all that shit. So that was also, like, a fun thing to get some Genesis stuff on there and play it that way, too.
Nice. Excellent. Well, cool. I played it on the new Sega Ages port that is out on everything. This came out a couple years ago. This is the version... It's by M2. It's a very, very nice port / emulation of the game. It's on Switch and PS4 and everything. Mm-hmm. It's much better than the one that is in like the Genesis Classics collection that you can get. And it's got Knuckles in Sonic 2 as well. So I actually played it to completion twice, one with Sonic and Tails and one with Knuckles, and got to Super Sonic and Super Knuckles on both of those. So I had a lot of fun playing the full gamut of the game, because it's one of those games that you got to play multiple times.
Yes, absolutely, and God knows how many times I've played through Sonic the Hedgehog 2 at this point, because again, as we pointed out, it is older than me by exactly 2 days.
Wonderful. So that's actually going to be our main topic, kind of a nice, fun change of pace, I think. I'm excited to talk about that. We got another couple of little things on the show, including, Sean, I'm just going to open with this because it just happened and I'm weirded out by it. They just announced Kingdom Hearts 4 at a Square Enix event.
Yeah, they're making another one of those.
This is so funny. I woke up today, I'm scrolling through Twitter, I saw someone say, man, I'm disappointed in this super photorealistic look for Kingdom Hearts 4, and I went, that's a funny tweet. And I kept scrolling and saw someone else make a similar comment, and I'm like, no, they didn't announce Kingdom. And then I look and I'm like, no, yes, on a random Saturday morning, they announced Kingdom Hearts 4. Yep. And it's got a weirdly photorealistic art style where it looks like one of the modern Final Fantasy games, and Sora is not quite a cartoon character anymore. He's more like a realistic anime boy, and Kyrie's there, and then at the end, Donald and Goofy are walking around, and I don't get it. Kingdom Hearts, there you go.
Yeah, like, I would love if this just comes out in extremely timely fashion, and it's not delayed or anything, and it's just, like, it just comes out, because... the whole thing with Kingdom Hearts was forever that Kingdom Hearts 2 ends on a, like, sort of pseudo cliffhanger or whatever. I mean, it certainly didn't resolve the story from what I understand. And then people were waiting for Kingdom Hearts 3 for, like, 10 fucking years or something. I think over 10 years, ultimately, when it actually came out. Obviously, there were, like, a lot of weird spin-off handheld sequels and a PSP game and a 3DS game and phone games and all that kind of shit. People were like, well, where the fuck is the continuation? Where's the Kingdom Hearts 3? How are you going to wrap up the story? And from what I understand, Kingdom Hearts 3 does wrap up the story. It just has, like, a secret extra double bonus ending that, like, teases maybe actually Sora's, like, in this weird, like, sort of fake Final Fantasy Versus 13 world. That's, like, what I understand how Kingdom Hearts 3 ends. Is basically it's done, but there's a little bit of a tease. So if they then, like, in just a couple of years... totally just put out a Kingdom Hearts 4 when it seemed like it was more of we wrapped up the series, and if we want to do more, we can someday. Instead they're just like, no, this is just a normal cadence for a normal sequel that we're going to do for Kingdom Hearts 4. That would be the funniest thing in the world.
It would be. I mean, we have very few details on it so far, obviously, just this trailer.
Yeah.
My understanding actually is different than that, Sean, because my brother plays Kingdom Hearts, and he has ranted to me about 3. My understanding it does not wrap up the story at all. Like, it is, like, very open-ended and, like, barely, like, for most of Kingdom Hearts 3, it's fucking around with random Disney shit and, like, barely addressing the larger story of the games. And then there's a bunch of random crap at the end. Like, they even did like, almost like a Mass Effect 3 style extended ending DLC where they changed some things. And it just pissed off people more, is my understanding, because everything I've heard is that Kairi, in particular, is done very dirty in Kingdom Hearts 3.
Yeah. I think what I mean is that I'm pretty sure, like the Xehanort stuff is, like, effectively wrapped up as much as that stuff gets wrapped up in the kind of story that Kingdom Hearts is. And Sora, I don't know if this counts as a spoiler because I'm only half certain about this, is like he sort of symbolically dies, and that's the point of the, like, tease ending is like, oh, he's not actually dead. And that's like a sort of effectively a wrap up, right? Like, the antagonist is basically dealt with. The protagonist is kind of dead. If we want to do something else, we can follow up on this weird tease. And that feels like certainly much more of a resolution than Kingdom Hearts 2, which was a very, like, and now the real battle. It's a Halo 2 thing. It's like, oh, now the real battle begins. We have to finish the fight, and then you have to wait 10 years for it.
I did not think that's how Kingdom Hearts 2 ended, but this is a frustrating conversation because this is two people who don't know what the fuck they're talking about. Talking about Kingdom Hearts.
Kingdom Hearts 2 has the big tease about, like, the Keyblade Wars, and here's the graveyard of Keyblades and all that shit.
That's true. It has a lot of lore. The final scene of Kingdom Hearts 2, because I remember it very vividly when my brother beat it, is everybody, all the main characters getting back to the Destiny Isles and being home again. So it's not quite a, like, let's finish the fight thing. But yes, the thing is, they kept extending the story. Like, Kingdom Hearts 3, if you just played 1 and 2, you would have no idea what's going on in 3 because they made so many sequels in between that did further the story. Anyway, yeah, it's weird. I will say, I have not heard anybody, one fucking person who was satisfied with Kingdom Hearts 3. That game feels like it landed with a thud. So I'm very curious what this will be. It seems like the direction is, like, going really heavy on the Tetsuya Nomura Final Fantasy bullshit in this one, which I have a really hard time getting a read on the Kingdom Hearts fan base, like, what they actually like or want from the games. And I think the answer is they played these games as kids and they don't know what they want or like from them. But, yeah, I have no clue if this is the direction people want the series to go in. Are we getting our Final Fantasy Versus 13, but with Sora now? Like, I don't know. The trailer did have a brief bit of gameplay that was very sleek and cool looking. It looked very scripted to me, but there you go.
Yeah, I mean, we have no idea how long or how far in development the game is, and how much of, what looks like gameplay might just be, like, you know, E3 demo-y, like, oh, we made this little tiny section that you can put into your trailer, but there's no other game there for it. I am curious, like, just because it feels like the further Kingdom Hearts goes on, the less, like, Disney as a company is invested in the idea of Kingdom Hearts, because Disney has changed as a company so much since 2001, when Kingdom Hearts originally came out, that, like, I wonder if this is going to be fully where they just say, well, Donald and Goofy are there because they kind of have to be there. Maybe Mickey will show up, but let's just not do the Disney stuff anymore, because there's not, like, much Disney stuff in the trailer. So it's I wonder if they're just going to start to move away from having to fight tooth and nail to get whatever, like, Monsters University in there or some shit.
That would be funny if there's a Monsters University level and it's like a Persona style, like, school sim, but with the monsters. That'd be fun. No, I don't know, because Kingdom Hearts 3 wound up being heavier on the Disney stuff than I think people expected, because it did have all these new worlds. But I have very little read on, like, what people actually want from this series or where they're intending to go with it. It kind of feels like this is... We thought Final Fantasy 15 was dead. It's back again because the Versus 13 saga never ends. Tetsuya Nomura has some kind of, like, itch to scratch there. I also wonder if he's directing this, like, what's going on with the Final Fantasy 7 remakes, because he's technically the lead director on those. I have no idea. We'll see.
Yeah, there is something about the trailer that does make it just kind of look like it is, like, a secret other Final Fantasy game. You know, that the Final Fantasy 14 people are basically making Final Fantasy 16, And then Tetsuya Nomura was like, but I want to do a Final Fantasy. Oh, wait, I've got Kingdom Hearts. I could just make it Final Fantasy. Rip that Disney shit out, give Sora normal-sized feet, and now it's a Final Fantasy game.
Yeah. Disney's logo is on this. The Walt Disney Games studio head did have a statement saying they were excited to see it. They did not say anything about Disney stuff being in the game other than Donald and Goofy. So we'll see. I do think it's funny that this is like a relatively prompt announcement for a Kingdom Hearts 4 after the many-year delay of 3. But there you go.
There you go.
I have to cut in here, and Thomas just texted me a long text reacting to the Kingdom Hearts 4 trailer.
Okay.
So, okay. My aforementioned brother Thomas, who's a big Kingdom Hearts... Actually, I don't know if he's... I don't know his relationship to Kingdom Hearts. He's played them all obsessively. I think he's a fan. I don't know. He complains about it a lot to me. So I have no idea what's going on here. But here is his 3-paragraph reaction to Kingdom Hearts 4, the trailer. He says, well, it's cool to see them develop that setting more, and the keychain mobility thing looks cool. Hope that sticks around. But honestly, this trailer means nothing. The game probably won't come out for another 12 years. So, fair enough. The Lost Master arc thing, which is what they're calling this new thing going on, was already known. I think the games up to 3 were called the Dark Seeker Saga. But I hope he does a good job, I think he being Tetsuya Nomura, explaining the story, because not a lot of people played the mobile game where they actually introduced the topic. They have the movie version on one of the Kingdom Hearts compilation discs, that's like the games for PS4, but I had no context for any of it and didn't really get what was going on. So it could be a really cool story, sort of following up on the Versus 13 that he never finished, but it's at least as likely that it will be a confusing mess. I think more than likely, Thomas.
Yeah, I would not use the word at least there. I would say it is likely to be a confusing mess. Because it is like, I mean, it feels like from me at this point, if you want to keep up with the Kingdom Hearts lore, you both have to have, I mean, you have to have played all the games or seen the movie compilations of the weird mobile games that, like, don't exist anymore and never came out over here and that kind of shit. And also you have to be, like, deeply intimate with the, like, particular details of the developmental history of Final Fantasy Versus 13, right? Like, somehow that is now also part of, like, the fundamental lore of Kingdom Hearts going forward, is you have to know that there was this thing called Versus 13 that eventually is what Final Fantasy 15 turned into, and that Tetsuya Nomura worked on that game, and it was in development hell forever because he's working on that and Kingdom Hearts 3 at the same time, and then eventually that project was basically kind of taken away from him, given to a different team that actually finished the game. And it seems like Nomura has never been able to let that go, and so he's trying to make Final Fantasy Versus 13 Kingdom Hearts 4.
There you go. Kingdom Hearts Versus 13.
Yep.
All right. Sean, let's talk about some stuff before we get into Sonic the Hedgehog 2. I'll save my review of Sonic the Hedgehog 2, the movie, for maybe as a transition later on to get into the game that it's nominally based on. But what have you been up to, Sean?
Not a huge amount of stuff for the podcast. I mean, it's been a lot of playing the new Genshin Impact stuff because we're at the midpoint of the 2.6 update, I think is what we're on. So they're doing the festival in Inazuma. So it's just a lot of, like, hanging out with my Genshin Impact buddies. Just the festival in Inazuma is a cool event because it has a bunch of Mondstadt and Liyue characters are coming over after the Sakaku decree was lifted in the last Raiden Shogun mission, and so they're kind of paying off on some of that stuff and doing the thing I've always really wanted in Genshin, which is to get the disparate groupings of characters to do some crossovers. So just having scenes where, like, Albedo is talking to Yaimiko. There's a scene where Venti and Kujo-Sada interact that I think is incredibly funny. There's just a lot of stuff like that where you just get to see these characters who have never really crossed over. There's only been, I think, 1 or 2 very rare instances, even just in, like, the lore, where characters from the different nations, like, are aware of each other or talk about each other. And there's never been really anything where they directly interact. And so just getting all this stuff of all these people coming into Inazuma for what is basically, like the Inazuma version of Comic-Con or Comiket, which is what the like big con scene is for otaku stuff in Japan. And it's kind of like the loose framework for what the festival is in Inazuma that Yaimiko kind of sets up to sell all of her light novels. And so I've just been deep into all my Genshin Impact bullshit with that stuff.
I have been very excited to get to the festival, but I have a little bit of a beef to pick with Genshin Impact.
Okay.
I love so much about this game. They do one thing that annoys the absolute shit out of me. So last night, I am playing through the Kamisato Ayato story, which is a prerequisite for doing any of the festival stuff.
Yes.
So I'm like, okay, I hadn't had time to do this yet. Let me finally catch up on Ayato's story. It's really good. I'm having a lot of fun with it. Ayato, very fun anime boy. He's got the most elaborate costume in all of Genshin so far, and I love it. The crease on his pants is amazing.
Yes.
Everything about it, just amazing detail. I'm having fun with it. Then I hit a point in the story where it says, this character is currently busy on another quest. You have to go do this quest. I'm like, well, which one is this? It's Arataki Ito's story, which I hadn't done yet because it came out while I was sort of not playing the game. And then I put the controller down for the night and I haven't gone back to it because who knows, that could be 5 minutes into the Ito story, or it could be play the whole 2 to 3 hour quest line and then I can finally come back to this. Why do they do that, Sean? Where the hell does that come from? Why is that necessary? I don't get it, and it annoys me.
I mean, I suspect it's just a programming thing of that there are so many different variables for like a live game like that of different quest lines you could theoretically have active that has characters spawning in different spots. So I imagine it's not like an intentional choice. That always reads to me as like a thing they do to avoid scripting errors that would otherwise completely break quest lines rather than force you to go trigger something else somewhere else and then like get that to sort of like resolve whatever potential scripting errors might occur. So like that's always what it's read to me as. It's not like we can't break the lore of the world and have Arataki Ito's character model be in both these places. I imagine it's just more of a programming issue.
They should fix it. It annoys me. I understand there's probably like a legitimate reason for it, but this has happened to me several times. If you're not like 100% up on the game, this will happen to you trying to play the game, and it is a little annoying because it's stuff like that where it's like, especially because it's all like time contingent now, because like the festival only lasts the next like week or two, and I've got to finish Ayato's story, but oh no, and I have to go play Ito's story, which I wanted to do anyway, but I only have a certain number of hours in the day to play Genshin, so like it is a little annoying. And last night I was hoping to just play all of Ayato's story, and then it told me, no, you cannot, and I don't like that.
Yeah, I think in general the thing to do is to not have a bunch of the different Legends missions like opened, and only open that when you're planning on playing it. Like that's I think like the way to try to avoid that issue, because that's almost always those are the quests that have the thing of where they're having story-based characters spawning in like specific locations as a part of the scripting for the quest.
Okay. Well, there you go. So I don't have much more to say because that blocked my progress, and I haven't gotten to play more of Ayato's story. So
I'll say the Ito quest is great. So you should.
I'm sure it is,
because he also shows up in the festival. So it's actually also, if you want to do the festival stuff, it's very worthwhile doing that storyline as well to get the like info on that character.
I would love to. Again, it's just like I haven't had time to go do the Dawnslave stuff in the Chasm, which at least is not like time limited, so I haven't like been worrying about that. But like, you know, I'm still trying to work my way through Elden Ring. I was playing Sonic the Hedgehog 2 this week, so that ate up some of my time. Just normal work and stuff. And then like Genshin, I need to like go through and clear up some of the backlog in quests, but it is time consuming, obviously, because some of those take a while to do. So anyway, but I was having fun before it blocked me.
Cool.
That's my story. Anything else to say on Genshin? I hope we can have a bigger talk about some of this content later once I've caught up on it.
You know, just that it's really good, and I particularly love the like. I like they did this with the Lantern Rite Festival as well, where they've kind of like redecorated sections of the map, so it's all on the, I think it's called Rito Island, the one that like the island you originally come into has been like totally redecorated and like made to look up like Comiket, and I think that it is there's like a little like poster board thing for your characters to like stick their face through that is like a big tanuki guy, and you can take pictures with it and stuff like that. There are lots of fun little details and little things they've added in as well. That is a cool thing. So I'm just very excited for this festival because it just feels like in general this is a lot like the last couple of Leeway festivals we've gotten, where it's really heavy on like just like character stories and hanging out with characters and getting fun moments with that, and less on like little gameplay like busy work and stuff like that. There are some little gameplay mechanics they've put in. The tower defense game is back again, which is cool. I haven't played it yet for this version, but I'm excited to get into that. But it's the bulk of it is really just hanging out with your buddies and seeing what these different combinations of characters are like and how they bounce off of each other.
Sounds fun. I'm very excited for it.
Yeah.
What else have I been up to? I have a movie I need to tell you all about.
Okay.
This is not Sonic the Hedgehog 2. Sonic the Hedgehog 2 is good, but you have heard about Sonic the Hedgehog 2. I want to tell you about a movie that is in theaters this weekend that everyone listening to this absolutely needs to go see. If you take my recommendations seriously at all, please go see this in theaters. It is Everything, Everywhere, All at Once. I don't know if you've heard of this movie, Sean.
Yeah.
It's a new movie. It's released by A24, directed by the Daniels, which is Daniel Kwan and Daniel Scheinert, who are two directors who met in school, and their names were Daniel, so they call themselves the Daniels, which I think is a fun way to do that. Anyway.
And if they ever meet another Daniel they like, you can just throw more on the pile and just have as many Daniels as you want.
It's too bad they didn't like really theme that all the way down, like their cinematographer, their musician, like all of them, so it could just be a film by Daniels and then the movie's over. That's the whole credits.
Yeah, it's the shortest credit sequence in the history of Hollywood movies.
No, but Everything Everywhere All at Once. I got to see this Thursday night at our theater here in Iowa City, and it was actually a fun little pre-screening where they also had the composers. Son Lux is the band who did the music for the movie, and they were in town playing a festival, so they did a little 30-minute Q&A with the movie, and it was cool to hear from them. It just sounds like a fascinating production. But this movie is amazing. It stars Michelle Yeoh and Kei Kwan, who you would know. You know Michelle Yeoh for being Michelle Yeoh because she's a god. Kei Kwan was Short Round in Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom, and he was also one of the kids in The Goonies. He did a little bit more acting, but he actually retired like shortly after sort of like becoming an adult because he, in his words in a recent profile, just realized there were no good roles for Asian Americans in Hollywood and left, and the industry kind of had to wait to catch up to him, and he's come back for this movie, and he's also, I think, on a TV show that recently came out. But really, really cool to see him. He's an amazing actor at this point, and his work in this film is phenomenal, as is Michelle Yeoh's. But it's a fascinating film. It is a multiverse adventure, which is a thing that has become very popular in recent years, but this is not an IP multiverse adventure, which makes it a little different. It is basically about a woman, Michelle Yeoh, and her husband, played by Kei Kwan, who are a family who own a laundromat, and she is sort of disappointed and frustrated in her life, and gradually a multiverse adventure starts where she learns she is sort of a prophesied one a la Neo in the Matrix, which is a movie this film borrows from a little bit, in that there is a multiverse ending event happening, and she is someone who has a special potentiality. The whole conceit of this movie being that people can, through this technology, sort of match up with all of their different other multiverse selves. So maybe there's someone who has kung fu training, and maybe there's someone who has a different kind of martial arts or something cool that you can kind of hack into and then sort of be in all of those places at once, but doing those techniques. And it is hard to describe beyond that. I think of this movie as a sort of it is a very original movie. I think the movie it most reminds me of is the original Matrix, in that it is a combination of a lot of very disparate influences that shouldn't maybe mix as well as they do. And in that mixture, it feels really bracingly like original and unique and bold. So I would sort of describe it as a combination of the original Matrix, the Douglas Adams Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, because it borrows a very similar conceit as the Infinite Improbability Drive from those books, which I love. And it has a similar sense of humor all over it. And then I would also describe it as sort of 80s Hong Kong, a la the movies Michelle Yeoh was in or Jackie Chan was in, or both of them, as in Super Cop, and Looney Tunes. There's a lot of just balls-to-the-wall Looney Tunes kind of shit in this movie. And then it is also a very heartfelt, rich family story, and specifically, an Asian American diasporic family story. And it is just a tremendous movie. It's hard to spoil because even if you've seen the trailer and kind of know the premise, there is so much crazy stuff that you will not expect. The number of fun things they do with the multiverse concept, and they are constantly throwing out great jokes and ideas, and pretty much nothing in the movie is a one-off, because they'll throw out all these things and then they will continue to sort of come back with increasing sort of emotional or comedic resonance. It's really, really fascinating. I really cannot recommend it highly enough. It's incredibly directed. It has such a vision to it. I cannot believe this thing got made on the budget and scale it was made on, because you will watch it and it's just the amount of footage they had to get to edit all of this together. The visual effects, which were done by a very small team, are better than most of what you will see in Hollywood today. It is kind of the kind of movie that puts mainstream Hollywood to shame. And if there was any justice to the world, this would be a Matrix level hit that makes an insane amount of money and changes the trajectory of the industry. But it does not have an IP name attached to it, so that will not happen, sadly, anymore. Because we don't do that anymore. But, like, seriously, I would put this on the scale of, like, a Matrix, a Mad Max Fury Road, that kind of movie that is just, like, defining and incredible as a Hollywood production. And this is kind of a Hollywood-adjacent production.
Right.
But, yeah, I cannot recommend it enough. Sean, you need to see this movie. We need to talk about it.
Yeah, I definitely want to go see it. I remember that this was, I think it was in front of Spider-Man. It was either that or Jesus Kaisen 0. But just, trailers at movie showings are like, it's like 30 plus minutes of trailers these days.
Uh-huh.
So it's like, you're just like sitting there forever. And most movie trailers are like so nothing. And I just remember this trailer coming up. I think it was in front of Spider-Man is when I saw it. And it was the first time I heard about the movie and being like, oh my god, this is like a good trailer for a movie that looks really good. Holy shit, like, thank you just to give me this like one like spot of like actually anticipating a cool movie release in the deluge of just like utterly nothing, samey, boring video game or movie trailers for 30 minutes stuck in that theater seat. So yeah, it's definitely a movie that's been on my radar since then. And then of course Michelle Yeoh is always that'll get me to see something,
She makes every movie she has ever been in better,
yeah.
And this is by far the biggest role she's had in an English language production.
Mm-hmm.
This was amazing to me. She has been in Hollywood movies since the 90s. This is the first time she is top billed in an American movie. What the fuck have we been doing wrong? That is bad. Michelle Yeoh should be top-lining everything. She's amazing. She's great in this, obviously. But I really do just have to shout out Kei Kwan, and I hope I'm saying that right. I'm probably not. But it's so fun because you can see the little boy in there that we loved in Temple of Doom and the Goonies, who was like so kind of precocious and adorable. And also like heartfelt. Like I think there's something about Short Round that is like, I think Indiana Jones fans have always loved. He's really the kind of heart and soul of that movie, and that you can still see that kid in there in this 50-year-old man, but he's gone and lived a life, and he has all of that just as the like presence and like substance of a human being that I think you just see on screen, and he lives in the material that a lot of actors don't ever quite tap into. And also does some like cool like sort of martial arts stuff in this movie. There is a whole scene involving him fighting with a fanny pack, which is kind of a callback to the Goonies, but doing it it's very Jackie Chan. It is like one of the most clear like Jackie Chan lifts I've ever seen, but done well. Like this is like on par with like some of the kind of stuff Jackie Chan would do. And one of my main reactions watching this is it's insane to me that Disney has not already like reached out to him and like greenlit a Short Round series or something. They have to give the character a real name now. But, like, if you want to do more Indiana Jones, like, I love Harrison Ford, but he's going to die doing these movies.
Yeah.
It'd be great. Get Kei Kwan and do another. That would be so much more fun. Remember when they tried to give the franchise to Shia LaBeouf? That was a bad idea. Do it the right way. Come on.
Yeah. It's, they're determined to murder Harrison Ford at whatever cost. It's like Disney's mission in life. They failed to do it. They did it to his character in Star Wars, but they didn't quite get him. They tried, they broke his leg or whatever.
Yes.
But they're going to try to get him with Indiana Jones. It's like, hopefully he can make it. And then, yeah, if you have to wring every last drop of anything out of your IPs, which is basically what everybody does these days, then yeah, like a Short Round miniseries on Disney Plus or something like that, or just give him his own fucking movie.
Give him his own fucking movie, yes.
Yeah, that's a better idea than what most people are doing with their IPs.
That's very true. So anyway, I just have to praise that movie. It is really, really something special, and I'm being intentionally vague here because there's a million things running through my head that I'm not going to tell you about with this movie, but I just highly recommend you go see it. It's open wide. It's not going to be at like every theater, but I think it's on like 1,200 screens this weekend. So wherever you live in the United States or Canada, you should be able to find a screening of it. And I would very, very highly recommend it. Movies don't get much better than this, so go see it.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I also wanted to say, Sean, I have an anime I've been watching, and I have a question for you.
Okay.
Have you watched the show? This aired last year called Wonder Egg Priority.
No, I have not watched it, but I'm aware of it.
Yes. This is really funny. So this is a show that I had on my radar because a bunch of people on my timeline on Twitter and elsewhere had been talking about it when it aired like early last year in 2021. And I had wanted to watch it because it sounded very cool, and it was a very hyped show. But it was only on Funimation owned it, so it was only on their streaming app, and I don't have that, so I'm like, whatever. And then Funimation and Crunchyroll merged their services last month, so all the Funimation stuff is on Crunchyroll. So I found it and put it in my queue. And then the other night, this was actually right after we recorded the last podcast, Sean, I was sitting down to watch some anime. I was going to go watch Little Witch Academia, and I learned they have moved those movies off of Netflix. The TV show is still there, but I wanted to watch the 2 movies. And weirdly enough, those movies were bought by Microsoft's Mixer platform.
What?
And then I was trying to figure out, how do I watch something on Mixer? And then I realized it's integrated with Facebook now. And I immediately went to a piracy site and found the movies there and pirated them because I'm not supporting whatever the fuck that was. But they were slow to download. So I couldn't watch that right away. And I know I could probably just start with the TV show and be fine, but I didn't want to see the movies.
The movies are kind of like their own continuity. Like the TV show kind of like redoes a lot of the stuff that the first movie does. I mean, they're fun. It's fun to watch both. And it's like, I think you can do it either way. But yeah, it's not necessary viewing for the TV show. And it's also something that you could watch after the TV show if you wanted, because there's no direct narrative connection other than that they share the same premise and like characters.
But I'm a completionist. You understand this.
No, I get it. Yeah, I mean, I obviously watched the short movies before I watched the TV show. So yeah, I get it.
Right. So anyway, then I was like, well, I want to watch something else, but I want to watch something short that I could finish in like a week. And so I went over to Crunchyroll and I started Wonder Egg Priority just because I'm like, let's see what this is. And it's a really great show through the first 7 episodes that I've seen. And I was really enjoying it. It's beautifully animated. It's a really interesting sort of take on sort of like a kind of a Magic Girl formula, not to the degree of like a Sailor Moon or something. It's more grounded than that. But it's an interesting show. Then I noticed, this 8th episode is a clip show. That doesn't happen much in a 12-episode season. What happened here? And then I looked it up, and I somehow had missed that this show became, I guess, a crazy clusterfuck and is embroiled in controversy for a million different reasons. Mm-hmm. And it's all contained to the back half of the season. And I kept reading things saying the first 7 episodes were great, but then... And so I haven't watched any more yet. I don't know if I will. I probably will see it through to the end because there's only a couple more episodes, and I'm kind of curious what the hell happens to it. But I guess I had heard all the praise, and I had missed the hype cycle where the whole thing fell apart, and that is kind of funny to me.
Yeah, because that's the reason why I never got around to watching Wonder Egg Priority. Is that yes, I was aware of the whole cycle as it happened of people being like, "Oh, this show's really good," and I was like, "Oh, cool," because I tend to like. I have like a running Google Doc that I make for myself that's just like, as I see things coming up, that since I don't really watch anime weekly, and I would like to wait until the full core is done and then I'll go and I'll watch it in a couple of days. I just keep like a running document so that when stuff pops up, I know what to look for when the season's over. And that was one that went on there, and then slowly I started seeing it like turn, and that like people really, really hate the back half and particularly the ending of that show a lot, like passionately a lot. And it is a thing that I do kind of want to eventually watch it, like almost like for it to like see that whole thing and like actually know what it is in its entirety. But it's that kind of thing that I need to be in the right mood to intentionally tackle something that I know has this very like complicated reception in its fan base and that kind of stuff. It's a thing I do not have the ability to go and kind of blind watching it.
It's too bad, because through the first 7 episodes, it's an incredibly special little show. Like, it is really phenomenally animated. It has some of the best character animation I've ever seen, just in terms of the character designs, but the fluidity with which they're animated, the amount of performance that is in the animation. I mean, this is always something you have to think about with animation, is that there is the voice actors who come in, but the voice actors are the last step. The animators are building the character visually, and this is a show you could watch on mute and still get so much of the characters. But the vocal performances are also very special, because it's all it's all professional actors. It's not quite the kind of thing like Hayao Miyazaki does, where he'll get like actual kids who are not actors. But it is like younger people, like idols who have maybe just started their careers. And this is, I think, for like the main character, this is like her first TV credit, and it's a really, really special performance. The music is great. It's got it's a show that is about teen suicide and self-harm and depression and a lot of very heavy topics, and I think tackles them with a lot of adeptness. But then everything I've read is that it stops handling those things with adeptness. And I did read specifically, I'm like, well, now I just have to know what is the thing people are so mad about. And the reason I've not watched more is I'm very scared to actually watch what apparently happens, which sounds like a horrible, like a horrible misinterpretation of what the show was actually about. So it's weird. This was not something I was watching even to like talk about on the podcast. It's just because the story was kind of funny to me in that I really was watching it on a whim, bored one night because I couldn't watch the other thing I wanted to watch, and I was really enjoying it. And then I like ran into this roadblock, and I was like, "What?" So
yeah. It's funny because I think you tweeted something about the show at some point because I knew that you were watching it. I remember having the thought of like, should I mention anything to Jonathan? Because it doesn't seem like he knows.
Don't worry, Sean. Other people mentioned it to me.
Okay.
I didn't even tweet something big about the show. I just said it's got this great character animation, and I showed this one cut that really is. It's from the end of episode 6. Go look at that tweet. That is an amazing cut of animation. I genuinely like it. Looks like 9 seconds of animation where there are no in-between frames, and it's just like 9 seconds of keyframes. It is unfucking believable. But yeah, I was a naive little boy.
Yeah, it was just it was like I fell into a time hole or something. It was like, oh, like someone's tweeting about Wonder Egg Priority like in a totally enthusiastic way. Like it's like I haven't seen anyone talk about the show in that context in like over a year. And I was like, oh wait, it's Jonathan. Oh, weird.
I wonder if more people will be having this reaction because when the Funimation Crunchyroll merger went through, it's been promoted heavily on the pages, and like that's how I was reminded of it again and put it on my queue. And so I bet there's a lot of people who are going to encounter it and like me will have just missed whatever the like discourse around it was, you know. So we'll see. Anyway, I do finally have the Little Witch Academia movies, so maybe that'll be my next step. Although we've got to get started on the next Gundam, so maybe I just need to go watch some Gundam Build Divers.
Yeah, I've been rewatching a lot of Polar Bear Cafe because you started watching some Polar Bear Cafe and started talking to me about it, and I was like, oh fuck. So I mean, it's the kind of thing. I think this is how you're watching it as well. It's like you're not like marathoning Polar Bear Cafe because it's not that kind of show.
No.
It's more just like every once in a while I'll watch a couple of episodes and just laugh at my fun panda and polar bear and penguin buddies. But
I did meet the grizzly bear. I got far enough to meet Grizzly.
Oh, Grizzly's so good. Yeah,
he's wonderful. His episode does have the joke that made me laugh the hardest so far in the show, which is where it's a joke about a motorcycle and then it ends with Panda coming in on a tricycle, and I just like literally that could have been listed as my fucking cause of death because I was laughing so hard I almost asphyxiated.
Yeah, I think that's one of the best gags in the whole, like the whole thing is one of my favorite gags in the whole show because I just got to that episode again last night. And the best part is at the end, Panda coming in thinking he's like super cool, like trying to mimic Grizzly by being like Grizzly's like, you know, a biker and stuff like that. But he's coming up and it's like this little bicycle, and he's got an iPod or something on the front of the bicycle that has a song or whatever that's playing like motorcycle noises, and he stops and then he presses a button on it and the noises turn off. That's my favorite part of that whole episode. It's like one of the smallest but funniest little gags I have ever fucking seen.
But that's that whole show, man.
Yes.
It might be like the funniest show I've ever seen. It makes me laugh something fierce. Okay. Anyway, talking about old anime, enough of that. Do you have anything else before we move on to Sonic the Hedgehog 2?
Yes, there's one thing that talking about the Kingdom Hearts stuff reminded me of that I wanted to talk about is so like I said at the top of the podcast, I played my playthrough this time of Sonic the Hedgehog 2 on a Genesis emulator on my homebrew Nintendo 2DS. But that means that I had like this opportunity to go in and say, oh, let me throw on a bunch of other like my Genesis games and stuff like that I like and throw it on here while I'm getting Sonic the Hedgehog 2 on there. Because for people who don't know, the Sega Genesis was my first console. It was my brother's console, obviously, because I was not alive by the time that our family owned it, but my brother, who's 4 years older than me, had a Sega Genesis, and then I kind of like grew up into it, and so I grew up playing those games. So it's the thing it's like the console for me that I have like the most nostalgia for in that sense. And so I just put a bunch of the old games like Light Crusader and stuff like that on there that I really liked. And every time I play Genesis games, I have a curse that I have to like always experience this game over and over again, because it's a game that feels like it shouldn't be a game that's hard, and it is the most unbelievably, brutally fucking difficult game I've ever played my entire life. And
Can I guess?
Cursing me my entire life. Go ahead and guess.
It's Lion King, right?
It's Disney's fucking Lion King.
Yeah,
that fucking Lion King game. God damn it. It's so unbelievably hard. It's insane. And this is not like just, me. Obviously, this game is like infamously brutally difficult. It came out several years ago. I think it was like because they re-released this game with like the Aladdin game or whatever. This is the same. If you played the Super Nintendo version, it's the same game. So if you played Super Nintendo or Sega Genesis, we're talking about the same Lion King game. And when that re-release happened, it came out of like one of the developers said that basically the reason why the game is so fucking impossibly hard is that Disney basically made them make it incredibly difficult in order to make it a game that was like virtually unbeatable in the period of time you had where you could rent it from Blockbuster. And so that was their like strategy for like fighting video game rentals, was just to make the game impossibly fucking difficult so that nobody could beat it. So you'd have to either go buy your own copy or I guess rent it from Blockbuster over and over again. But we owned a copy of The Lion King because it was one of my favorite movies. I mean, it's still my favorite Disney like 2D animated movie. And it was one of my brother's favorite movies when we were kids, and so our parents got us the Lion King game on Sega Genesis. And the thing that's like the real motherfucker about that game isn't just that it's difficult, it's that like everything else about the game is so good, and it seems like it should be this like real gem of a game on the Sega Genesis and the Super Nintendo. It's got great music. Both versions of the game has great music. Because I have the Super Nintendo emulator on there as well, and I did boot up that version of the game also just to compare and contrast it, be like, is there any chance the Super Nintendo one's slightly easier? And it's like, no, they're both equally impossibly difficult. But the music is fantastic. It's obviously, you're getting either Super Nintendo or Genesis renditions of classic Lion King songs. The graphics are incredible. It's got so many great animations for the characters from the movie, particularly Simba as your playable character. His animation for when he's clinging like on the edge of a ledge and you're trying to like climb up on top of it is so good, and there's so much detail. I believe that like Disney animators who worked on the movie actually like participated in the development of the game in capturing some of like the animation of the characters. And so everything about the game, the way it feels, like the controls, all that stuff is incredibly good. It's just that the levels are like virtually fucking impossible. And particularly the second level is just one that, like, I legitimately can't just sort of normally beat still to this day. Like, get to the second level, and it's where it plays the I Just Want to Be King song. So I have a Genesis loop of ba-da-ba-ba-ba-da-da-ba stuck in my head till the day I fucking die, because every time you die, it restarts the song from the beginning. And in that level, it tries to recreate some of the elements of the musical sequence from the movie. And so there's all this stuff where you're like getting tossed around by monkeys in these trees, and then you end up on ostriches, and there are these ostrich sections where the ostrich just runs by itself, and you have to duck under some obstacles, jump over some other obstacles, or you can do a double jump where you jump once and the ostrich jumps, and then you jump again and Simba jumps from the back of the ostrich. And the timing on the double jumps is so impossibly fucking precise. It is like, if you miss it by a fraction of a second, you are going to die. And it moves quickly enough that I still don't really know what it is that you're even avoiding, because you can't really see it. It kind of blends into the background and it goes by at such a speed. I think it's just like a little bramble in a tree in the background or something, but it's something that, again, I'm not even entirely sure what the fuck the thing I'm even trying to avoid. The only reason you can even avoid it is because a little arrow pops up on the screen that says like, hey, get ready to jump. And then you just have to memorize the timing by playing the sequence enough to know, like, get it seeped into your bones enough to say, okay, this is where I jump, and then this is where I jump again. Because it's not immediate. You have to time the second jump in order to avoid the obstacle. It is just the most impossibly, brutally fucking difficult game I think I've ever played in my entire life. And it's like insulting that everything else about it looks like this super cheerful, happy Disney game, fun time playing Lion King, and then you're like, I can't play more than 5 minutes of the game without having to restart from the beginning because of how fucking hard it is.
That's great. I love it. What would you say is a harder game? The Lion King or Elden Ring?
A Lion King, easy. I mean, it's not even close. I mean, imagine every time you died in Elden Ring, you had to start from the very beginning of the game. Like, you woke up in the crypt, you went back, you remade your fucking character. Like, I mean, that's, because this is old school. This is it. People act like, oh, Sekiro, Dark Souls, and that shit. Oh, it's so hard. It's like, no, old video games, you died enough, and it's you're done, motherfucker. There's no saves. Like, checkpoints aren't a thing you can rely on forever. Eventually, they will take everything away from you, and then you have to get fucking Timon going, it starts again, and then you're just like, oh, I'm here. It's the very, very beginning of the game. All of that progress, everything I did, all to waste. Anyone who thinks that modern video games are hard at all just is young or they've forgotten. Because old video games, when they were hard, they're effectively impossible to beat.
No, yes, they are. There's even some things in Sonic the Hedgehog 2 we're going to talk about that I don't know how you do without save states. Genuinely. And that's not a very hard game by those standards of that day.
No, yeah, that's that. Sonic the Hedgehog is a pretty it's a pretty generous series in terms of how you can get extra lives and the number of continues they give you. There are no continues in the Lion King. You've run out of lives and that's it, motherfucker.
Man, I'm imagining a poster for the next live action Lion King they're doing, and it just says as the tagline, "There are no continues in the Lion King."
Motherfucker, they got to put that part.
Motherfucker, yeah,
put that part in it as well.
Got to get Samuel L. Jackson in the next movie to deliver that line.
Exactly.
Yeah. Anyway, well, I'm glad. Is that the only other Genesis game you've been banging your head against a wall, or are there others?
I jumped in and messed around with a bunch of stuff. I tried to see if I could find any weird, obscure Japanese Sega Genesis games like I did with, I talked about Neon Genesis Evangelion Mahjong, and I couldn't find anything that weird, or anything weird I found was stuff I already knew about. Because I watch Game Center CX, the Japanese show that plays retro games, and that show is almost at 400 episodes at this point. So they've basically exhausted all the obscure Famicom, Super Famicom, and Sega Genesis era games, because they've moved on to they're starting to do PS2 games and stuff like that because those consoles are old enough, they're over 20 years old that it's those are retro games now. Because you can only stick on the Famicom for so long. So yeah, I don't have any other obscure Genesis games to talk about that I jumped into. But Lion King, fuck that fucking game, man. My whole life, I'm an adult man, and it's been my whole life that game has haunted me.
All right. So let's talk about Sonic the Hedgehog 2, the video game. I am going to tell you guys about the movie, but I'm going to save it for the end because there's some stuff I want to spoil, and I don't think Sean will mind if I spoil.
I don't give a fuck.
Yeah, but just in case there are other people, I will put it at the end just to make it easy because there's some genuinely fun surprises in that movie, and I will just say, I do recommend it. If you like Sonic the Hedgehog, this movie will make you smile. I don't know if it's a must-see in theaters, but I would definitely recommend seeing it. It's a really, really fun movie. But let's talk about a really, really fun game. Sonic the Hedgehog 2 from November 1992, which we remember very well because right before Sean's birthday, right after mine. Sean, here's the thing. I don't know if I personally have ever actually played this game to the completion before. I realized that I remembered most of it, but after Sky Chase Zone, it was specifically the last two parts, Wing Fortress and Death Egg, I've seen... But I just, there was something about I don't know if I've manipulated these parts with my hands. Do you know what I mean? Because you, as you've said, you had a Genesis as a kid. I did not. My first home console was an N64. My first Sonic game would have been Adventure 2 on the GameCube. And then eventually all of the Genesis Sonic games were on GameCube in the different collections that they had. And so I played some of them there. But it was never quite my thing as a kid. I played the Sonic games more when they came out on Xbox Arcade, those ports, which you can still, I don't know if you can still buy them, but you can still play them on Xbox because of backwards compatibility.
Because that's actually, I started playing Sonic the Hedgehog 2 on my Series S because I had all those versions, and then I eventually thought, like, oh, well, it'd actually be kind of cooler to get the Genesis games on my 2DS XL, so I moved over to that version. But yes, if you own those games, and I suspect you probably can still buy them, but if you did own those games, those are all backwards compatible on modern Xboxes.
Yeah, and they're still very good ports. They're a little like fuzzier in terms of visual clarity than like some of the more modern ports, but they're still good. It's the only way you can still play Sonic 3 and Knuckles on systems because that has been delisted and not sold for years now. You can emulate it, obviously, but you know what I mean. Anyway, so yeah, I think this might be the first time I played it to completion, and I played it twice this week. Like I said, I played it all the way through, getting all the Chaos Emeralds with Sonic and Tails, and then I did the same thing with Knuckles, and had a lot of fun both times. This is a phenomenal game. This is, one of Sonic's finest hours, and as you say, Sean, just like one of the best video game sequels of all time, because I know the original Sonic very well, and I love that game, and it's good, but there's just no denying that 2 and 3 are better, and 2 is just, it's not just a great game, it is also a landmark piece of pop culture, because this is the game that actually, made Sonic really famous. This was a global hit. This got a lot of people to buy the Genesis. This is, one of the most recognizable games ever made.
Yeah, I mean, it's a hell of a fucking game, and this time when I played through it, I've done the whole, get supersonic and there's not really super Knuckles or whatever, but beating it with Knuckles. I've beaten it with Tails, although Tails in this one, if you're playing as Tails, you can't fly, so it's not really a different experience the way it is with Sonic 3. But I've done all of that. But with this playthrough, I just went with a very basic. I just played through Sonic and Tails. I intentionally didn't do any of the Chaos Emerald stuff, because this is the game that has my least favorite special stages. I kind of hate the special stages in Sonic 2 with the fucking tunnels.
They're pretty bad.
And the rings and all that shit. I've legit beaten the game with Supersonic once, and now if I want to play with Supersonic, there's a code, in the original Genesis version of the game, there's a code you can do with the sound select stuff that allows you to just start the game with Supersonic as a thing. So if I ever want to do Supersonic Sonic the Hedgehog 2, that's what I do. But I just went with a very vanilla playthrough, and just kind of blazed through it. Because I've beaten Sonic the Hedgehog 2 enough at this point that I don't need to use save states for it. The first couple of times I played the game on the Xbox 360 version, and any time the only time I ever really went for the full supersonic thing, I definitely use save states, because I am never going to try to get supersonic legit. It's because you just have to restart and know those levels so much to not be able to just restart from the beginning and try them over and over again using a save state. But yeah, I just kind of blasted through Sonic the Hedgehog 2, because I've played this game probably over to completion over a dozen times at this point.
Yeah, totally. And obviously, a lot of older games, and the Sonic games in particular, are sort of masters of this. They're meant to be replayed over and over again. But yeah, I had a ton of fun with it, and I even think I actually had even more fun with the Knuckles. For those who don't know, that's if you had Sonic and Knuckles, you could put that onto the Sonic 3 cart and get Sonic 3 and Knuckles, but you could also put it on the Sonic 2 cart and get Knuckles in Sonic the Hedgehog 2, where it's his whole moveset from Sonic 3, but he's in Sonic 2, and he does go Super Knuckles. It works a little differently, and I actually think in general, the Knuckles version actually makes several key improvements, particularly around ring retention, and then how he goes super. With Sonic, you just jump and he turns super, which means sometimes he'll turn super when you don't want him to, and it makes it harder because he moves too fast. But Knuckles, you have to do a double jump to make him turn super, so you can control it better. But yeah, I always like Knuckles because he's red, and I like red, and he looks cool running around.
Yeah, the thing with Knuckles is that they just never really gave him a proper. And it's the same thing with Tails. I don't remember if Tails can go Super Tails in Sonic 2. He definitely can in 3, but they never gave them different character models. They just flash.
No, they just flash. Yeah.
So that's always been a thing where it felt like you guys could have done something. I always felt like Knuckles should look like Super Saiyan Trunks, because he's got a similar hairstyle, and I've always been disappointed that you don't get a proper Super Knuckles character design.
I have to say, I forgot. I mean, we all know that the supersonic thing is a ripoff of Dragon Ball, but I had forgotten Sonic's animation when he goes supersonic in Sonic 2 is just like pulled from the manga of Dragon Ball Z. It is just Goku doing the like hands down like scream. It's like frame for frame. It's an actually fairly like impressive recreation of that like animation, but in a Genesis game.
Yeah, I mean, when I was a kid, because I had played these games first, like when I saw Dragon Ball Z, I was like, "Oh, this is like awesome! They're doing the supersonic thing." Was my frame of reference for it. Just the order in which I experienced those moments, as like a little kid in America. Obviously, if you're in Japan and playing these in real time, you would have been well aware of the order of what inspired what. But yes, that was always one of my favorite things about Sonic was, I was way into these games at the same time I was getting way into Dragon Ball, and so the Super Saiyan Supersonic thing definitely like coincided for me at the same time, and it's always been something where I don't understand why every media property doesn't have characters scream and turn super powerful and have their hair or whatever turn gold and look super cool. It makes Sonic better, it makes Dragon Ball better, it could make everything better. Like every media property should use that in it would make everything better.
I'm just waiting for the Jane Austen adaptation that finally has Elizabeth Bennet go Super Saiyan at the end of the story.
Yeah, I mean, you could really just destroy all the sort of constrictive gender norms of her society if only she could fire Super Kamehameha.
We're getting off track. Sonic the Hedgehog 2, do you remember playing this for the first time, or is it just too early for you?
It's too early. And we didn't own a Sonic the Hedgehog 2 cart. We rented those. The Sonic game we owned was 3, because we didn't own a lot of Sega Genesis games. Because I think we only owned maybe about like 7 or 8 total, and like 3 or 4 of those were Madden games. Like I have since bought more Genesis carts when I can get them very cheap. But Sonic the Hedgehog 2, well, it's not expensive or anything. It's not like you can't just get it for like $3 or whatever, which is like, I got like a copy of Earthworm Jim, I think for about 50 cents at a flea market at one point. So I have more carts now.
For people who don't know, this was very common back in the day that you would own a very sparse number of games for your console, but you would rent quite a few, because everywhere you could go rent games. I know that is a absolutely insane concept now to people, but yes, you would go down to Blockbuster and you would get the cart, and sometimes it would have like a save that was like way advanced, and that would be fascinating to you on it because they were just on there.
Yeah, and this, like, I'm talking so long ago that I'm not even really talking about Blockbuster. I think Blockbuster existed at the time, but it wasn't close to where we lived. There was a small mom and pop shop that was where now there's like a hospital there. Like that whole area got changed. But there was like a small mom and pop rental shop that then when the Blockbuster moved in down, Jonathan, is like in the area where it was like kind of by where the high school,
by the grocery store,
is. Yeah. Like when that Blockbuster came in, it shut that mom and pop shop down. Like, so this is so long ago that like this is when Blockbuster was like a fearsome competitor that was putting your local businesses out of business before Blockbuster was the thing being put out of business by everything else. So this is how long ago like that goes back for me for like renting stuff like Sonic the Hedgehog and Sonic the Hedgehog 2 and playing those games. And again, Sonic 3 was the one we owned, and then eventually I got a card of Sonic and Knuckles. But I'm almost certain that Sonic 3 was the first game I ever played, because that was the one we owned that I just played endlessly because I loved that game so much. And then eventually, renting the earlier games and then playing those a lot. And then I'd probably own like 5 or 6 different versions of Sonic the Hedgehog 2 across the like Xbox Genesis collection and the Xbox 360 versions and the PC version. And there was a phone version on like not smartphones. I think there is a smartphone version. I'm sure there is. I mean, like on a flip phone, you could play Sonic the Hedgehog 1 and 2, and I owned those. And would go to the bathroom during class when I was bored and play those at the bathroom because it's like I'm not paying attention to this dumb math class. Instead, I'm going to play Sonic the Hedgehog 2 like a cool kid. In like 2003 or something, like a cool kid playing Sonic the Hedgehog 2. Yeah, so that's kind of like my relationship with the game is just like it's a thing that's kind of like always existed, and I've just like kind of come back to in different ways over the years. But it's always like for me, my reference point for Sonic is so centralized around Sonic 3 that there's stuff about Sonic 2 that feels like very novel, almost because it doesn't have the things in Sonic 3, but it is so close to the Sonic 3 in experience compared to Sonic 1, which feels, in that, if you're playing it backwards, more like the sort of like foundational thing that hasn't fully figured out entirely what it wants to be yet. It's missing key features like the spin dash, and sort of the level design is fairly different. That Sonic 2 is, at its core, very similar to Sonic 3. Sonic 3 just makes a couple of changes to how it presents like story stuff and some of the different power-ups and stuff like that. But that's kind of like generally what my relationship to Sonic 2 was like growing up.
Well, then I want you to kick this off. Tell us why Sonic the Hedgehog 2 is such a historically great game and why it still holds up today.
Yeah, I think like one of the main things, I think this is something that always needs to be talked about when you talk about classic Sonic games. I know we had this conversation on like when Sonic Mania came up, but there's definitely a thing where people like to shit on Sonic. You know, it's oftentimes not unduly. Obviously, lots of Sonic games have been bad, particularly when you got into the 3D era. And you know, I'm not here to defend Sonic the Hedgehog 2006 or any of like the shit the franchise has put out. You know, like, hey, I own one of the few Sega Genesis games I own is Sonic 3D Blast. That game is not a blast. That game fucking sucks shit. So Sonic games, there have been bad Sonic games for a long time. Sonic 3D Blast is truly an awful game. And so, you know, I'm not going to defend the bad Sonic the Hedgehog games, but I think sometimes people shitting on Sonic the Hedgehog, like, extends over to people making the argument that, like, the classic Genesis games and that style of Sonic game was never really that good or something. And it always comes across as, like, a bunch of people who grew up on Nintendo consoles who are jealous because they're Nintendo people, and so Nintendo people are kind of lame. And Sega kids were always the cool ones that had the cool games with the good music and, like, the cool art style. And all that stuff. And so they look at Sonic and be like, well, haha, Mario has continued to be very successful in the 3D era. Sonic has struggled a lot in that era. Therefore, the Sonic games never were actually good because Mario person, could never really play them because Mario people try to play them like Mario games and make the argument that like Sonic games are like inherently bad, or they control poorly, or they don't make sense because it's like, well, if it's about running fast, why do you have all these obstacles that you have to avoid and stuff like that? That just, it's frustrating because it keeps you from running super, super fast. Isn't that the whole point? It's called Sonic, fuckers. Like, come on. And it always just comes across to me as people who just like, because your framework is Mario, you approach the game as a Mario game, and it's like Sonic the Hedgehog's not like that. And for me, it's interesting because while I respect and can enjoy the classic 2D Mario games, I don't actually love playing the classic 2D Mario games because, to me, Sonic the Hedgehog is kind of what a 2D platformer should be. And I think it's one of the reasons why I don't like 2D platformers that much is because I like the Sonic games, and I wish that more games were like that and games were less like Mario. But that's just not like the direction the industry went in.
This is a really interesting comparison, Sean, because I love 2D platformers and I love all these games, right?
Yeah.
So I think they're all great. And I do, as an adult, find it really interesting to compare and contrast them because I think the Sonic games, in comparison to the Mario games, they are in some ways like less elegant. I think they have more flaws in terms of parts that I find frustrating or that aren't quite as refined, but they are also like much more ambitious on the level of art design and and graphics and all of that kind of stuff. And as you say, what they're going for is fundamentally very, very different. Mario games I think there's a certain elegance to 2D Mario, that they are very like they are slow and they are methodical, and the challenges are sometimes even kind of like intellectual on top of being kind of like about, you know, your instincts or any of that kind of stuff. And they're much more about sort of, you know, moving through the level and slowly going through these, and sometimes you'll have some exploration, especially when you get to like 3 and Mario World and stuff like that. And I love that style, and Mario's always had that great thing. The Sonic games just provide an entirely different kind of rush that is just so much more about momentum, and it is also about, I think, visual storytelling. They're very good at like conveying a world through mise-en-scène. The Nintendo franchise that Sonic has more in common with is not Mario at all. It's the Donkey Kong Country games. Donkey Kong Country takes a lot of influence from Sonic, and to me, Donkey Kong Country is easily the best of the 2D platformer series, because I think it kind of takes the best of both, where it is this very momentum focused, very mise-en-scène focused thing that also takes some of the elegance from the Mario games. But I think they're all kind of fascinating to kind of compare and contrast. And yeah, I do think a lot of people who criticize Sonic, there are definitely things to criticize there. They are not perfect games. But what they do well, they do pretty uniquely well. And they have a lot of things that Mario games just don't even really try to offer. And that's fine. That's why I'm glad we have both, you know?
Yeah, it is something of where, yeah, I think there just needs to be an understanding that, like, Mario and Sonic games are played fundamentally differently. And I think it's particularly, like, I think it was never a problem at the time because 2D platformer was this sort of generic default genre of most console video games, certainly in America. I'm starting to learn as I'm doing more of the emulation stuff that there are like 100 million like strategy RPGs that came out in Japan on the Famicom and Super Famicom that never came out over here. So apparently, that was a much more robust genre for a long time than I think most people in America have realized, because like most of those games never came out.
Yeah, most people don't know that Advance Wars wasn't always Advance Wars.
Yeah.
It was Famicom Wars and it was Super Famicom Wars, and there were a ton of them before they got to Game Boy Advance.
Yeah, so Japan had all that shit going on, which is cool. But over here, like, it was really like the 2D action platformer was just sort of like the generic video game genre, and then anything else was like on a home console platform. Obviously in arcades you could have a lot of their stuff, and PC was a whole different world. PCs at the time were very bad at doing 2D action platformers because of the way the hardware worked. But if you're playing home console games, everything was usually some sort of flavor of 2D action platformer. So it didn't really matter at the time, and like the reception for Sonic the Hedgehog and Sonic the Hedgehog 2, 3, and Knuckles, I mean, those games reviewed incredibly well. They sold millions of copies. They're some of the most successful games released in that era. But when you look back on it, I think everyone kind of defaults to Mario, or not everyone, but like Mario people default to Mario, and any deviation from Mario feels like a weird sort of like eccentricity of the genre because it hasn't been a tradition carried on in future games. But if you approach Sonic fundamentally for what it's going for, which is, as you say, Jonathan, it is momentum-based gameplay first and foremost. Like, that is the primary concept around which challenges and levels and elements are built in Sonic the Hedgehog. It's not just about speed, it's about momentum. So it's about Sonic has a slow build-up to his movement that then eventually turns into that very iconic full run with his legs moving so fast that they look like little red wheels, basically. And it's about his jump, taking into account things like angles and slopes, which is one of the big innovations of the original Sonic the Hedgehog that is fundamental to the game design, is that the landmass can be sloped in very complex ways. It's not just like the loops or whatever, but all areas are covered in slopes all the time. Like the first boss of Sonic the Hedgehog 2 takes advantage of this by having very, very small minor gradients in the sort of incline of areas on the plane that, Robotnik goes back and forth on with his little drill robot or whatever, that slightly changes the angle and height of your jump in the direction of it, and it changes the speed at which you're able to move. It's obviously harder to run up slopes, and eventually if the slope is steep enough and you lack momentum, you will fail to get up it and start going down it. And if you're moving down a slope, you build momentum very quickly, and you have particularly in Sonic the Hedgehog 2, you have a much, much higher top speed, which is something in Sonic the Hedgehog 1, they restricted that a lot more. And in 2, you can get moving ridiculously crazy fast if you find the right conditions to do it. And then the other thing that Sonic can do is turn into a ball and roll, and use that to both attack enemies and avoid attacks and things like that. And that also obviously is all momentum based, because you're now no longer, when you're in a roll, you're not able to use the controller to alter your direction or momentum. You just let the what we would now call physics. I don't know if in a programmatic sense if it's even really technically physics, but you just let the program take over and sort of determine the speed and direction of movement of your character. So the whole concept of Sonic the Hedgehog is about manipulating the momentum of the character to your advantage to be able to avoid obstacles, to be able to get onto more favorable paths, because particularly in Sonic the Hedgehog 2 is where they hit on designing much bigger areas that have lots and lots of different pathways. So every level has, probably if you combine the different variations of where you can fall off of and get back onto different routes through the level, dozens of different ways that you can play through a level. And so each playthrough is generally fairly unique in the exact combination of pathways that you use in that playthrough to get through the level. and falling off and coming back on and discovering secret areas and stuff like that. And so it's about using and building your momentum to avoid obstacles, navigate through the level, try to get onto the most favorable and complex path, and then to be able to ideally beat the level as quickly as possible, with keeping in mind that the kind of game it is from the era it's in is a game that's meant to be replayed multiple times. It's one of the reasons why the live system exists the way it does, is to like force you to replay if you're not playing skillfully enough, so that you learn the levels and you learn the obstacles and you learn the mechanics of the game so much that you then are able to play through the entire game in one sitting, without ever having to, without dying so much that you're reset all the way back at the beginning because you've reset or you've used up all of your lives and continues. So that's like the fundamental structure of Sonic the Hedgehog 2, and every element of its design is just like a core key advancement over Sonic the Hedgehog 1. The levels are much, much bigger, but there's also only 2 acts for each level, which is a huge improvement. Sonic the Hedgehog 1 generally has 3 acts per level, which is too many. Like, those areas go on for too much. Whereas Sonic the Hedgehog 2, the pace is so tight because you only have those 2 acts and a boss at the end of Act 2, with the one exception, and then like the couple of like weird stages at the very end. Every stage of Sonic the Hedgehog 2 is 2 acts. The spin dash, which did not exist in Sonic the Hedgehog 1, which always fucks anybody who goes back and plays the first game up, because you always expect to be able to roll into a ball from a standstill and accelerate in any direction you want. That was a huge improvement, because otherwise in Sonic the Hedgehog 1, if you miss a sort of run-up and you don't have the momentum you needed, you had to just run backwards the other way and try to build momentum, rather than in Sonic 2, you can just kind of reset, build momentum from a standstill, and keep moving through the level. And so those elements, and then just like the general narrative presentation of the game, there are a lot more sort of like little connective pieces between levels, little kind of story bits, particularly when you get to the end and you've got Sky Chase Zone with the plane and all that kind of stuff, that builds a more kind of complete sense of this as like one long adventure rather than a series of completely disconnected levels. Like, all of those are really massive improvements that Sonic 2 makes over the original, that are then like the foundation from which like Sonic 3 goes and refines all those elements even further.
Yes, absolutely. It really is a game that is just a holistic improvement on its original. It's like a Mass Effect 2 or something. I feel like would be a modern equivalent of a game that just, the sequel, it's a sequel to a really good game that somehow still blows it out of the water, right? Because Sonic the Hedgehog 1, I think, is sometimes unfairly shit on. There's a lot of cool stuff in it, but Sonic the Hedgehog 2 is sort of a masterclass in all that game's flaws because of how it addresses them. You know, you're talking about like Sonic 2 has bigger levels, and it does, but you can get through them way faster because of all the different routes and stuff. Like, you can get lost in Sonic 2 levels and die, but usually what that tells you is go look for a different path. Sonic 1, there are levels that are just kind of slogs to get through, particularly anything underwater. Marble Zone, which is World 2, has a lot of parts that are just kind of a slog to get through that do not do a good job building momentum.
There's like weird puzzle stuff in Sonic the Hedgehog 1, like in Marble Zone, where you like have to push blocks onto levers and stuff like that. That just is like, doesn't really make sense with what the rest of the game is. And it's like they identified all those sort of things they experimented with in Sonic the Hedgehog 1 that just like didn't quite match the overall design philosophy, and cut all of those elements out. But yes, it's not that the levels are bigger in this, not in the sense that they are longer, but in the sense that there is more to them. So it's more of like a vertical widening out of the level and building out those multiple paths. Because most Sonic the Hedgehog 1 levels are generally, like, every time you play through them, it's usually kind of the same playthrough. A couple of them have a couple of extra pathways, but most of them, there's basically one core way to get through the level with a couple of minor deviations from that core path.
Sonic 1 is more like Mario in that sense. It does have this sort of like, there are some variations, but it's mostly variations on that main line through the level. And Sonic 2 just blows that out of the water, and it's much more like, you know, sometimes you normally, this is a side scroller, you think you should go left to right, but no, you need to go right to left here. You know, Sonic 2 has a lot of stuff where you have to reorient yourself. And so it does have this incredible pace to it, where just like, you move through a level and you get a really big adrenaline shot from it, and then you're on to something completely new, you know? And so that kind of, and I do agree with you that the 2-act thing is just it's a giant breath of relief. And I forgot to say my story with why I know Sonic 1 so well. I think I've told this on the podcast before, but Sonic the Hedgehog 1 has an infamously bad port to the Game Boy Advance. It was called Sonic the Hedgehog Genesis.
Oh, yeah.
And it was like from 2005, I think. It was around the time the DS was out, but the GBA was still getting games, and Sega did this port of Sonic 1 to the GBA. And I got that for Christmas one year. This is like one of the most... go look, there's like video essays on it now because it's so famous. And it is one of the worst ports of anything ever. But I was a kid at the time, and I was given the game for Christmas, and so people don't know this anymore. But as a kid, when you got a bad game, you just played it because that's the game you had, right?
I played a lot of Lion King, that fucking thing.
So, like, I did beat Sonic the Hedgehog 1 in that GBA port. I am probably one of the few people on Earth who has beaten that game in that version, and it was hell. It's the worst version to experience that game, but I kind of went through the crucible with it, so I have a weird fondness for Sonic the Hedgehog 1, even though I have since played better versions of it, obviously. But at the time, that was my introduction to that game. Sonic the Hedgehog 2 is much better in any form you play.
Yeah, I mean, for reference, the old flip phone mobile port of Sonic the Hedgehog 1 is more respected than the GBA version of Sonic the Hedgehog 1. Like, that's the level of, like, oh, you guys fucked this up, that port is.
It's hilarious. Like, it's not that it looks bad. It's specifically about, like, slowdown and input lag, and there's stuff like, you know, in Marble Zone, there's the big, like, pillars that come down and can crush you if you're standing under them. You don't have to be standing under them for them to crush you. It's stuff like that. It's a bad port. But anyway, yes, Sonic 2 just... and I think that's one of the things when I go back to it now and just, like, start from a fresh save and just play the game fresh. It is such a, like, energetic game that you can lose yourself in, even if you know it really, really well, which you know it much more than me. But it is still just, like, there are a few more pleasurable things to do in a game, I think, than just sit down and start playing Sonic the Hedgehog 2. It is just such a tight fucking video game.
Yeah, it's just very much the kind of game with Sonic that is about, like, getting to that point where you're entering a kind of flow state, where you're just, like, reading the game very rapidly. You know, like, good Sonic levels have all these, like, little environmental clues that kind of give you the sense of what's about to come next, usually using, like, ring placement and stuff like that kind of guides you, and being able to, like, pick up on things and adapt to them very quickly. And there's something about just, like, really sort of mastering the sense of momentum, and knowing that you're not meant to just hold right constantly the entire time in Sonic the Hedgehog. It's not just about, like, trying to move right at full speed at all times. It's like a racing game. It's about, like, knowing when to sort of, like, put the brakes on a little bit so you can make, like, the turn in a race. Is like that for Sonic, of, like, just, like, you know, fan the, like, right on the D-pad just a little bit enough that you're losing that momentum a little bit, that then you're jumping and you're sort of gauging that exact jump you need to get over this area. Like, those kinds of things, when everything, like, clicks together and you're really in the zone with the Sonic game, it just is a really kind of magical experience in that genre that no other games I've ever played really kind of, like, match that exact feeling to me. And it's why I, like, am in the habit of constantly kind of playing these games in little bits and starts, just because it is just it's such a go-to game. Any of the classic style Sonic games are go-tos for, I've got, like, 10 minutes to play a video game, like, just, like, boot that up and I'll play 3 levels and just have a great time and walk away from it. It's not a thing where, you know, the vast majority of times I've played Sonic the Hedgehog 1, 2, or 3, or Knuckles, it was never with the intention of playing it to completion. It was just like, I'm just going to play this for a little bit before I have to go to do whatever I have to do next.
Yeah, no, they're very fun in that regard. I think, you know, all of that is true. The most impressive thing about Sonic the Hedgehog 2 to me might be what an absolute graphical powerhouse it is. Mm-hmm. This is one of the best looking games of all time. Full stop. Not for its day, no, it is one of the best looking games ever made. The sheer amount of variety in art direction in this game, the amount of, like, worlds that are, like, conveyed through the mise-en-scène of the game, the way it tells a story without telling a story, just through moving from Emerald Hill Zone to the chemical plant to the aquatic ruin. Then we're in a casino. We get into a cave, and then I especially think the final half with Oil Ocean to the Metropolis, and then to the air with Sky Chase, Wing Fortress, and Death Egg, and that movement through, like, nature and industry and gambling and oil, and then you get to the heart of it, and this machine in the city, and then you go up into the sky. Combined with, obviously, Genesis music is great. Sonic the Hedgehog 2 has an all-time great soundtrack, from Chemical Plant Zone to the very end. I mean, they're just all fucking incredible. It is really an aesthetically kind of overwhelming game. It constantly presents sights that are just kind of jaw-dropping to me. Like, Oil Ocean Zone is fucking gorgeous with the, like, sunset, like, the orange sunset and all the, like, refineries in the background. But then it's also a fucking oil ocean, so it's, like, dark and grimy. You know, I was playing this game on my Switch OLED, and it just looked like the colors on this game still pop, as well as colors in, like, any game made now. It really, you know, there have been better looking Sonic games. Sonic Mania takes all of this and puts it to the next level, and it's great. You know, it's kind of like, what if you had done Sonic on the Saturn or something? But man, it is still, I think, one of the best, like, visually designed games ever made.
Yeah, because I would definitely even say that I think, like, graphically, I think Sonic the Hedgehog 2 is a bit better than 3 and Knuckles. Specifically, I think because 3 and Knuckles has so much more going on with the levels that, like, there's less memory for them to be able to do, like, the Sonic sprite and stuff like that. So a lot of, like, the specific sprite work in Sonic the Hedgehog 2, I think, is the best sprite work in the classic series of Genesis games, because it just is, like, everything reads very cleanly, all the colors pop, and, like, the overall aesthetic design comes together so well, and it is just, like, you know, even just playing it in the kind of, like, raw pixel aesthetic, the like the artwork underneath is so strong that it comes through so thoroughly, and it's just got one of, I think, the cleanest overall, like, visual presentations of any 16-bit game I've seen, and that's one of the ways in which it, like, holds up so well, right? That it doesn't feel like it has a retro aesthetic and a retro vibe to it, but when you play it next to playing a lot of other, like, 16-bit games from the era, it doesn't feel like it's aged. It feels like, oh, this could be a cool retro aesthetic game that came out from an indie team yesterday, right? It, like, exists in that kind of space where obviously there are technical limitations, but you don't see or feel or experience the technical limitations of the art while you're playing the game, because it feels like such a whole representation of what it wants to present itself as.
Oh yeah, you put this up to most games that were also coming out in 1992, and it's just, you know, this is incredible. And I mean, really pushing the Genesis, because the Genesis didn't always look better than the Super Nintendo. There are plenty of Genesis games that look like quite a bit worse. There's, you know, the both systems had their strengths and weaknesses. There are obviously very, very beautiful Super Nintendo games as well. And there's games that had, you know, rough parity between the two, like Lion King or something. But Sonic the Hedgehog 2 just, you know, it's a definite contender for best looking game of the 16-bit era, right? Like, it has to be in that conversation. And, you know, this was the height of a certain kind of video game art, and, like, this is as good as it gets for a certain era of gaming, and it still holds up just tremendously today.
Yeah, and then, as you said earlier, it's the variety of what you're experiencing. Like, every single area is so distinct, is so unique. It defines its sort of own unique aesthetic within, like, the overall art design that comes across so well. Of that, like, classic Sonic art design that I love, of the mix of nature with this kind of harsh 90s cyberpunk thing that you get with the, like, the Robotnik, more Robotnik sort of influenced areas, and that like very rich contrast of the greens of Emerald Hill Zone with the, like, harsh metallic chemical plant, and that kind of, like, pairing off right at the beginning is such a great intro to the game that presents to you its, like, two main sort of overall sort of thematic styles that then are mixed and matched in different ways through the, like, subsequent levels.
I mean, you know, everyone knows that Sonic is cool, right? Because
Yes.
Sonic is the cool mascot. But Sonic is also kind of punk in these early days. Like, there's a real kind of punk aesthetic and a kind of political edge that, like, it's not overt, but it's definitely there in the visuals of that what you are protecting, what your home point is these beautiful green hills, emerald hills, these beautiful idyllic, you know, almost like Garden of Eden kind of things, right? And then you go out into the world and there are chemical plants and there are literal oil oceans and there are these big cities in this, like, as you say, kind of grungy cyberpunk vein. And what you're doing is you're fighting all these robots and pieces of industry and literally, like, freeing animals from, like, little torture dens and letting them go back out into the world. And you are defending, like, the nature of Earth. There's, like, an actual kind of environmentalist vibe to early Sonic that is kind of punk in this way that, you know, is one thing I do think kind of in general is missing from like a lot of the 3D games, is that tension kind of goes away, and it's such a fun part of these early ones.
Yeah, to me, it's like part of the core thing of Sonic. It's one of the reasons why, you know, like I get why the like these new Sonic the Hedgehog movies go into the like CG Sonic interacting with humans and all that kind of stuff. But I've never liked that. It's never made sense to me. Like, I always just feel like in Sonic, Robotnik slash Eggman should be the only human character, and everyone else should be some sort of like Sonic anthropomorphic animal kind of thing, because it's the foundation of what Sonic is, and it intentionally is an environmentalist thing. Like, it started with that with Sonic the Hedgehog 1. It has always been an intentional element. Like, obviously it's not like a big, you know, complex, broad narrative, like going into the depths of like, you know, exactly what is wrong with capitalism and industry and that kind of stuff. It's an aesthetic put over the game that sort of like gives it this kind of sense of unity, and gives it a core sense of like kind of meaning to everything that you're doing that connects the broad tissue of the game. But it is really fundamental to the original identity of what Sonic the Hedgehog is, so much so that that's the main thing that then the like the cartoon, the Saturday morning cartoon, the more dramatic one that everyone loves, that was then the sort of basis for the very, very long-running Archie Sonic the Hedgehog comic book series, is all based on those ideas and made it more explicit, because it's more heavily narrativized, that in that it is Sonic and his friends are freedom fighters fighting against Robotnik, who is like industrializing the forest, and it's all the freedom fighters living in the forest on the outskirts of this evil cyberpunk city that Robotnik is trying to expand and like cut down all the trees and all that kind of stuff. So yeah, it is always a thing that has been really core to the identity of the series, and it is one of the elements that always attracts me to Sonic over Mario. And I think one of the reasons why I've never been like a big Mario person in general, is like a big fan, and particularly as a kid, is that Mario's narrative and characterization, all that stuff is so like abstract or like kind of non-existent. It's more just sort of, Mario always feels like Mickey Mouse to me. It's like there's not really much of a character there. It's just a nice character design, and it's a cool, like, the art and everything in Mario is nice, and the music is very nice. All that stuff is good, but it doesn't have like any like meaning to me. It just is like cool, or it's just like visually pleasing. Whereas Sonic the Hedgehog, everything feels like it's connected with actual meaning, and that goes down to like the world, and then also Sonic as a character is a character. He has a personality. Like he expresses his personality in everything he does as a sprite in the game. How he moves, how he responds when you just leave him standing there, his animations when he looks up, the look on his face, like every single piece of Sonic is built to like sort of emphasize his characterization as this like kind of cool, laid back hero who's not going to let Robotnik get away with what he's doing, versus Mario going to some castles where there's maybe a princess, but there's not a princess because she's in another castle, kind of thing.
Right. Yeah, Mario is much more like purely gamic in its logic and its presentation. Sonic is a little more mixed media in that sense. And although with a very clear mastery of, I think, how to imbue this into game design and game art, there's definitely always been like two broad approaches to narrative with Sonic, and that is the Sonic Sat-Am approach, the Saturday morning cartoon where they're freedom fighters and it's environmental, and then there's the Sonic X approach, right? Yeah. Which is the series that adapts the more modern Sonic stuff, where it's Sonic comes into our world from another dimension and all his friends follow, and then they're in the human world. And I don't hate the latter one. There's definitely been some very good stuff done there. I like Adventure 1 and 2. I even like these new movies, especially the second one, a fair deal, and there's fun to be had there. But definitely if you know, for whatever reason Paramount Pictures had come to me to make the Sonic movie, it would have been a freedom fighter, you know, Robotnik as an evil industrialist, you know, that's what we would have been doing, and it would have been that sort of thing. It would have been fairly depressing, frankly, and that's probably why they didn't do it. It's easier to do a comedy with the more Sonic X kind of thing going on, right?
Yeah. I remember being so disappointed when Sonic X came out, because I was like, what the fuck? Who's this kid? Like, why is there a human? It's like the last thing I ever wanted in the world was like some like, you know, cynical marketing. We've got to have a boy in the show so that the boys can relate to the boy. You know, it's the same like reasoning that some like random dude is like, well, we can't have just Batman. We have to have Robin. It's like we have to have the sort of like boy mascot cipher character for the audience to see themselves through. This like, don't do this. Like, if you're going to have characters, invest in your characters and make them actual characters, and don't just sort of cynically say, well, your audience can't relate to a story unless there is a character, like a small white boy for our small white boys watching the show. Like, it's just such a awful, bad, cynical way to construct media. And that's why I never liked Sonic X, and I was very disappointed when that kind of became the ongoing core thing that Sonic was as a franchise from that point forward, was either like literally in our world or in a world with just like there's just sort of Sonic people and human people, and we never really addressed the fact of why is there a giant hedgehog man talking to the United States president who's just a human.
Some of that can be fun, but I do understand what you're saying.
But it just doesn't resonate symbolically with like the core of the franchise to me.
I actually think maybe a smart thing they did with the new movies, the Paramount movies, is that Sonic is the audience insert. They just made him a little younger and make Sonic like a hyperactive kid, and then he is the kid, and the kids in the theater, which makes sense. That's what the kids want to be Sonic, right? They don't want to be Sonic's friend. They want to be Sonic.
Exactly.
I actually do think if you view the new movies as kids' movies, which is what they are, obviously, that's something they've done that is very smart, I think. Yeah. But anyway, we're getting off track a little bit here. Do you want to just hit some of these individual zones and talk about anything we like in them? Because they're all really good.
Yeah, sure. What's one that you want to...
Well, let's just go through in order, because there's not that many.
Yeah.
Emerald Hill Zone, every Sonic game has a Green Hill Zone kind of thing. They're all good. Emerald Hill Zone is a good one. I don't know if there's a ton to say about it, but it definitely, I think you compare this to like Green Hills in the first game, and it is a very clear sort of like remake of that, but in the Sonic 2 style, and I think it immediately teaches you why Sonic 2 is better.
Yes, yeah, exactly. It's sort of a redux. I mean, even much more so than like Sonic 3, which has Angel Island Zone, but that zone like is only actually green lush forest or whatever, and in that case it's a jungle for a very brief period, and they set it all on fire. This is in terms of classic Sonic. While I think we have the impression that everything is going to have your Green Hill Zone, this is really the only time in the Genesis era that they did it. Of here's a full-on take off of Green Hill Zone. As you say, I think kind of showing this is the same sort of fundamental idea for your starting area, but this is how it's realized in the sort of design logic of Sonic the Hedgehog 2, with a lot more interworking pathways. It's like, it's such a much more complicated area than Green Hill Zone in terms of like all the different kind of areas you can go through. It's got, your Sonic the Hedgehog waterfalls that look weird if you don't play it on a CRT, but there's kind of nothing you can do with it. It's got, big expansive areas, and it also very smartly doesn't have a bunch of death pits, which is always a thing I forget about in Green Hill Zone. Is near the end of Act 2 of Green Hill Zone and in Act 3 of Green Hill Zone, there are just like death pits with like spikes and stuff that you can fall into and just not get out of and die. And it's always comes across as like that's a particularly like mean thing to put in your first level basically of your video game, whereas they don't do that until Chemical Plant Zone is when they start giving, here's a thing where you will, even if you have rings, you will get killed by it. Emerald Hill Zone I don't think has anything in it that does that.
I don't believe so, but yes, it is. It actually is interesting because it's big and complicated right from the start. Emerald Hill Zone has plenty of paths to go through. It's not just like a boring starter level, Yeah, and that's something I like about it. But Chemical Plant Zone, is that the best piece of music in Sonic? Chemical Plant Zone?
I mean, that's a big conversation. I mean, it's one of the best. Yeah, I mean, for sure. It's certainly one of the most striking Sonic the Hedgehog songs ever. I mean, as soon as it pops up, the like you know you're in for a sick jam. Every time you boot up Chemical Plant Zone.
I love it. It's my bop. It's a fucking phenomenal song. The zone itself has a lot of stuff I like in it. It has a couple of annoying things to me. There's an area near the end of Chemicals Plant Zone Act 2 that drives me crazy if I accidentally get down there, which is where you have the blocks you have to climb on while the chemicals are coming above you. With Knuckles, it's easy because you just climb up the wall. With Sonic, that part drives me fucking up a wall, and I hate it. Other than that, Chemical Plant Zone fucking rocks. There's an area in Chemical Plant Zone Act 2 where you can go so fast you almost break the game.
Yes.
Because you almost break the screen boundary, and I love that. It's a very cool level. And in terms of art design, this is such a let's show you what we can fucking do on this thing, and it's crazy.
Yeah, Chemical Plant Zone is fun for it's got that contrast of it is definitely one of the easiest levels to find where you just get like these huge runways and like these big like weird interconnecting like pipes and stuff like that that you just are like running over and can get an insane amount of speed on. But then it's also got some of like the I find very satisfying little like kind of platforming isn't even quite what it is because it's not even the areas over jumps, but they're just lots of good little spots where you can like when you jump on an enemy as Sonic, you bounce off of them and can like chain jumps together, and you can do that and then doing that to then land on one of the little blocks that covers a pipe thing that you then can go into and launch from that and go off of a spring. And there are areas where you can like stay kind of bouncing in the air for a really long time that I find very fun in Chemical Plant Zone.
Yes. This is one that got remade in Sonic Mania, and I think is even better in that game. But yes, the original Chemical Plant Zone is a classic. Aquatic Ruin Zone. I really like what they do with Aquatic Ruin Zone, because if you haven't played Sonic 1, the water parts of Sonic 1 are terrible. They're not good. They're bad. They're unfun. When people say Sonic is about going fast, blah, 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 sometimes they're wrong. The problem is, definitely when you put Sonic underwater and make him walk like a snail, that is a bad way to do Sonic. I do think that is an unfun way to do Sonic. And I think the smart thing Aquatic Ruin does, and this is true of other areas of this, there's actually not a lot of water in Sonic 2, but when there is water, it's intentionally a thing to avoid. The thing about Aquatic Ruin Zone that's fun is that you get underwater, you will probably die. You can do it, but if you die, you also go back and you realize there's another way to go where you can avoid the water. And I think that is super smart and cool, and it's something I love about this zone.
Yeah, it's one of the most clear like top path areas in Sonic is like trying to stay at the top level so that you're not dropping into the water at all. You can get through the whole level that way. I love that about this area as well. This is also, I think, one of my favorite bosses. In Sonic 2, this is the one where like the two totem pillars come up on either side.
Yes.
There's something, and they shoot like little arrows or whatever that you stand on to use platforms. Something about that boss is like so unique. It's such a kind of like different sort of thing of where it's not even like you're not even really fighting Robotnik so much as you're just like fighting this like weird little stage that's been set up for you and using those as platforms. But that I've always found that boss fight to be very memorable.
I like that one a lot. Casino Night Zone. Casino levels are a classic in Sonic. They're always great. They're even in the 3D games.
This is where the casino tradition started.
Yep, and it's phenomenal. It's a classic for a reason. I like that the casino levels just embrace the chaos. They just have bouncy things everywhere. You're literally bouncing off the walls. You are commonly confused about where you are, but the thing that makes it so good is that wherever you wind up, there is still a viable route to go on. It never like just abandons you somewhere,
Yeah, and there's just a lot of very elaborate sequences of you going from like bumpers and then like shooting him up like a pinball, and falling into the little center thing that does the slot machines and all that kind of stuff. You definitely get a lot of just like weird, goofy sound effects and just and bouncing all over the screen. And sometimes you really just sort of like. Sometimes the best thing to do in Casino Night Zone is like just let the controller go and just let it do its thing. Just like you're just gonna bounce. It's like don't touch anything. Just let it. You're bouncing everywhere. It's just like and then he lands. It's like okay, does it say it again? Let me move forward.
Yes, no, I absolutely love it. And I just have a fondness. Anytime a casino comes up in a Sonic game, I get excited. I have fun with them. The 3D games are often at their best in the various casino zones. Sonic Adventure 1 just has full-on pinball at a certain point. Yeah. These games are very fun when you get into the casinos. What is the Robotnik boss in that one?
That's one where... It's a
big pinball area. Yeah,
and it's like a half ball or like a U-shaped arena or whatever on like a half pipe thing. And I love any Sonic boss that is in the kind of like half pipe shaped arena is super fun. Like the mid boss in Hydra City Zone in Sonic 3 is like this, where you can just like super spin dash up the side of the wall, and so you're not even like you can just jump from the bottom and get him. I think he like drops spikes on you or whatever. But if you go up the side, you can just sort of like in spin dash mode fall off the side of the half pipe and just land on top of him. And if you can do it well, you can just stay up there and keep bouncing off him and kill him that way. That is like anytime you can get that in the Sonic the Hedgehog boss is always fun because it's a very like different way to approach doing damage to the boss.
Yeah, this is one of my favorites because of the specific way you have to use the momentum and the physics to make Sonic fall at the right time. And if you do it right, as you're saying, Sean, you can just cheese this boss.
Yeah.
It's not even cheesing; it's just a really fun way to just bounce on him a bunch. You know, there's a lot of options for it. It's a cool one. Then we have Hilltop Zone, which is sort of our other big like natural area that sort of looks like Emerald Hills, but more up in the sky. There's also like lava in this one. I think this one is super cool. There's just a lot of like very interesting like foliage, and then there's the lava parts. There's these parts where you're sort of underground and you have to like run from the lava. There's these parts where you like go on these like what do you call like gondolas kind of going across. It's a great one.
Yeah, I really love Hilltop Zone. Like, Hilltop Zone's one of the interesting ones where early in Sonic the Hedgehog 2's development, it was originally conceived as being that the framework was going to be a time travel game. Not like Sonic CD, where that's like a gameplay mechanic, but just like that's how the levels were themed. And then eventually they kind of like, they didn't, I mean, I guess they kind of scrapped that core conceit, but they had done some of the art design work for it anyways. So they just sort of like took some of that work they had done. So that's why Hilltop Zone has a bunch of like dinosaur enemies and stuff like that. That's kind of where some of that kind of vaguely prehistoric imagery that Hilltop Zone has comes from that I like. It's just like it's all the enemies in Hilltop Zone only exist in Hilltop Zone. I think that's kind of cool.
Yes.
And this is one where I really love the audio track for Hilltop Zone. There's something about it really captures something with the Yamaha synthesizer on the Genesis to get that kind of like whistling sound that that is, it's in like the Genesis sound chip thing, which is not a sound chip. I mean, it is a synthesizer. It's such an interesting thing because games that didn't know what to do with it, like, ended up sounding like complete garbage. But anything where you have like a really good team, like adapting their music for that synthesizer, like you could just get so much good stuff out of it. Where like Hilltop Zone and then the next stage as well, Mystic Cave Zone, are good examples of songs that like I have never heard a remix or anything of those songs that to me sounds as good as the Genesis version, because it's like the specific noise, and Chemical Plant Zone I think is true for that song as well, like specific quality of the sort of like very harsh 90s synthesizer that the Genesis had is like, it's part of the aesthetic of the song, it's part of the musical identity, kind of tonality of the song. And so if you adapt it to other media, it can still be a cool version of the song, but it's never going to be like, for me, like, you know, for almost any Super Nintendo game music, I would prefer like a full actual instrumental version of the track, because you're just using MIDI sound samples to try to replicate instrumental music. Whereas like Hilltop Zone is just like, this is fucking crazy, weird, good synthesizer music that to me, anything else doesn't really capture the exact flavor that that music gives you.
Hilltop Zone also has the most hilariously easy boss in the game, because it's Robotnik in one of his like machines, and he's coming up from the lava, but you can just kill him like the first time he comes up by just bouncing on his head a bunch, and then it's over. And even if you don't do it once, you just then jump back up to one of the green spots and you wait and you're fine. It's a very funny one.
Yes, that is definitely one of the easiest bosses in any of these games for sure.
Mystic Cave Zone. I always think of Hilltop and Mystic Cave kind of as a duo for whatever reason, because I think they both are very unique in the game. Hilltop is very bright. Mystic Cave then is obviously it's at night. It's inside a cave. It's darker, but there's all these like, you know, Mystic Cave has a lot, or Hilltop has a lot of like unique enemies and mechanics. So does Mystic Cave. Mystic Cave has the one where you have a lot of like pulleys that you do, and you lower bridges and stuff, and you create paths for yourself. And I think it's a very fun one. This one also opens up a lot with Knuckles if you play with him in a lot of really fun ways.
Yeah, Mystic Cave Zone is one where over the years the music in Mystic Cave Zone has like grown on me so much. Where like when I was a kid, I didn't like it very much, but now I think it might be my favorite track in Sonic the Hedgehog 2. It's so, there's something about it that is so fucking gnarly. It is the best example of like a song that I've never heard anything like capture the like edgy gnarliness of the like that, and like this like kind of like screeching wailing noise that's on top of that kind of bass line. I've never heard anything capture to me like what that feels like for the Sega Genesis, and like still get that like weird tonality across. And it's such a weird song. It's so different than any other Sonic the Hedgehog stage music, particularly like in 1 and 2, which are both composed by Masako Nakamura, who's the composer for the first two games. Like it's just a totally different kind of style he went for Mystic Cave Zone. And in my older years, I feel like that song is just an absolute bop, and I love it to death.
As an appreciator of bass lines, I fucking love Mystic Cave Zone. And it is, as you say, it's that mix of that absolute killer bass line with that weird wah, wah, that's like this weird screeching, and it's just so unique. It gives it such, and this is true of all the Sonic levels, the music just adds so much texture to the world. But yeah, that one is, I think, a standout. You're right.
Yeah, it's just Mystic Cave Zone has this very thick mood and atmosphere to it as a level that I love. Because it's so many, games in that era have their sort of like cave area, but it's also kind of a mine area, is sort of like what the aesthetic of Mystic Cave Zone is. Like I think like most iconically, the Donkey Kong Country games all have their like mine carts and that kind of stuff, and so it's a very common aesthetic from that period. But Mystic Cave Zone, it's like that mystic part, I think, comes across. There's like something just very mysterious and eerie about that stage that I love.
Oil Ocean Zone is one of my all-time favorites. The gameplay is great, but it's almost less about that to me than just I think it looks so amazing. That orange, setting sun look, all of the like silhouetted sky and like refineries and towers and all of that in the background. You've got like the sun sort of burning through, and then you've got the oil and all of the machinery and stuff. It's really, really striking. And this is also one of my favorite parts that Sonic Mania did, where Sonic Mania took Oil Ocean Zone and took it to the next level by having the oil be lit on fire in a bunch of places. I love that. I went back and replayed that in Sonic Mania last night, and it's so good. But yeah, Oil Ocean Zone is like such a striking level.
Yeah, I think it's probably my favorite background for a level. Yeah, with the actually like the kind of orange sky and then the city or whatever it is that like off in the distance. Yeah, it's a very memorable level. I like the thing in that level where you've got the like caps or whatever to the pipe that then shoot off with fire, and like you can like jump from those like across each other and stuff like that. I've always thought that was a very fun mechanic.
The animation on Sonic when you're like sliding on the oil down the level and all of that stuff is so fun too. Yeah. And I think the boss here is fun. It's one where you have to kind of like avoid these things that Eggman sends out, and then when he comes up for air, from the oil, you go and bop him, and it's a good one.
Yeah, because this is the one where it shoots the laser horizontally, like at like 3 different heights that you have to avoid, right? Yeah. So there's a couple, like you can only hit him at certain times, and so you have to kind of like take your shot, but then you have to avoid a lot of stuff, and it winds up, sometimes those can be annoying. I think this one is done really well. Yeah.
Then you get your sort of the final main zone of the game, which is Metropolis Zone, which is the only three zone area. So it's the biggest one. It's where you're like in, and you really do get this sense of like culmination where you've gone through the different industrial areas and now you're in the like heart of the city. Metropolis Zone has all of like, and this one kind of combines a lot of different mechanics from the game, where it's got a lot of like, pipes and stuff to run fast through. It's got pipes that kind of shoot you around. It's got sort of the like bouncy areas where like you get bounced between things going up. It's got these enemies that are like these fucking praying mantises that shoot fucking knives at you that are terrible and like mean to you. But I do kind of love them because they kill you mercilessly. There's a lot of cool stuff in this one.
Yeah, I really love all the gimmicks of Metropolis Zone, but I think this is where they went a little bit overboard with the enemies, because every enemy in Metropolis Zone is a real motherfucker. There's
a lot you have to like learn where they're gonna be, and even if you know it, sometimes you just can't avoid getting hit because of the randomness of like the bouncy mechanics. That's what I'm talking about, the praying mantis guys. I kind of love them because it is so satisfying to finally kill them once they've shot their like knives at you, but those knives will fuck you up, and I don't like them.
Yeah, because they shoot out and then they start to go up a little bit, so even if you try to jump over it, it can still catch you, and it's a little bit like, it's slightly too mean, I think, the design in Metropolis Zone with the enemies.
Yes. The boss is also kind of that way, where I genuinely don't know how you avoid getting hit by the flying Eggman thing at the beginning when he's got all the balls around him. At least as Knuckles, who has a slightly shallower jump, it's incredibly hard to get through the early stages of that, and you're just going to have to pray you hold on to one ring.
Yes, no, it's this boss and the very last boss are ones where Knuckles having a slightly shorter jump sort of like makes the mechanics of the boss not work exactly the way it should, or at least it feels it should with Sonic. Because it's also, I think, like, I like a lot of the ideas of the mechanics of the boss of this level, but I do find the boss a little bit tedious to actually beat because it's just like you have to go through so many phases of.
Yes.
He does the whole spinny thing, and then there's that like one little window where you can jump up and hit him, and then you break one of the balls or whatever. But there's just not like, at least unless there's probably like a strategy for taking out the boss I'm just not aware of. But I've never really managed to get like successive hits on that boss, and it just sort of like takes a long time to beat.
I don't think you can get successive hits because you have to get a hit and then kill the little Eggman that comes out and then move on. So yeah, it's one where you have to stand around and wait a lot, and I don't love those. But you are rewarded with the 3-level end sequence of Sky Chase, Wing Fortress, and Death Egg. And other than I don't really like the final boss of this game, and we'll talk about that. Other than that, this is like one of the all-time great video game endings. That entire sequence of being on Tails' plane and flying up and having all the stuff on the plane. I love Sky Chase. That's probably my favorite part of this end sequence. Wing Fortress is a super cool, like, gauntlet of a level that I really came to love. And then I do really like the Metal Sonic fight. I completely forgot this is the game Metal Sonic is from. I just thought that was Sonic CD in my head.
Technically, this is not Metal Sonic. This is Mecha Sonic. Those are two totally different things.
Sorry.
Metal Sonic is a Sonic CD character. Mecha Sonic shows up as the sort of second to last boss in Sonic the Hedgehog 2. They are not the same character. Let's get our Sonic the Hedgehog lore right, please.
I do apologize. Also, this starts the tradition of Sonic games ending with you going to space, which is something we've done a surprising number of times in this series.
You know, it's what better place to have sick boss fights than on a giant space station? There is no better place to have a sick boss fight.
No. Sky Chase Zone also has one of my favorite tracks on the soundtrack. I think it's super cool. It's like very chill and just sort of relaxed, and it kind of emphasizes just sort of like the beauty of being up here in the sky and fighting these things, because it's not a hard level, really. You're gonna get through it. This is like the easy part, but it is so still like fun and engaging, and I think it's a very unique track that's much more laid back and quiet, or at least slower than the other tracks on the soundtrack, but I really enjoy it.
Yeah, because this is one where the composer for the games, for the first two games, Nakamura Masato, he's a composer and was a bassist for a J-pop band called Dreams Come True, and I'm pretty sure that Sky Chase Zone is one of the songs that basically was like they were working on a J-pop song, because it sounds so much like it's like a B-side song or something, and I'm pretty sure it literally was, and then they just like sort of he turned it into a song for Sky Chase Zone, because it is one of those that you can, it's very easy to imagine like the vocals and like lyrics and stuff like that to Sky Chase Zone.
Yeah. Wing Fortress, this one, there's a point in this level that fucked me up last night playing it as Sonic, because I was stuck as Super Sonic. And I was it's the part near the end where you have to go down through there's these rotating like platforms that kind of go up, and you get on all of those. That's easy enough. And then it's all of the little ones that come up, but they'll close on you as you go to the end of the level, and those ones is Super Sonic. I did make it through, but I had to save scrub a little bit. It was very funny.
Yes, this is one of the levels that being supersonic is a liability for. There's a couple of levels where that's true, where, because you can like avoid it, like you can if you time your like when you let go of the A button right and you don't like hold on to it for too long, you can get the full height jump and not turn into supersonic, but it's very delicate. It's like it's one of those where it's a little bit of a motherfucker if you've gotten all the Chaos Emeralds at that point, which is your last opportunity to get all the Chaos Emeralds.
And again, they make it better with Knuckles because you just jump twice to become supersonic. It's like the first example of a patch in a video game. It's just to patch it, you had to plug another video game on top, right?
Yes.
Anyway, but yes, I like Wing Fortress. I like Mecha Sonic. I do think the final Eggman boss, or he's Robotnik, but the final one is like the Death Egg or something. The big robot.
No, the Death Egg is the Death Star, but it's
the
Death Star in Sonic the Hedgehog. This is just a big robot that looks like Eggman.
Big robot. So you're in the big mecha Robotnik you fight. I think it's a bad boss. I think it's very illegible what part you can hit and what part you can't and win. And it's mostly just trial and error. And once you get it down, it's pretty easy because the pattern is easy to see. I just think, and especially with Knuckles, what parts you can and can't hit. I think the game is usually very good about making that legible, and I don't think it's very legible in this one.
I disagree. I really like this boss. I think with Knuckles, this boss is a motherfucker because his jump is too small. But I don't know. There's something of, I think there are two main ways to approach the boss. There's a very cautious way where there are a couple of like windows after he does his jump where you have a very easy hit to him when his two spiky arms are like fully retracted, and you can get your hit there. But then you can also be very aggressive and take out the boss. You can take out this boss very, very quickly if you time your jumps, that he does his like walk forward where he moves his sort of arms with his walk, and there's like a brief period where one arm is moving back and the other is moving forward, where you can get a very clean hit on him without getting risk of getting poked. Where so you can hit him like 3 or 4 times between jumps. So I've actually always really liked this boss, but I've also played.
I've never worked out the timing on that. Yeah.
Yeah.
That last part, but yeah, no, you've played it more than me, so that makes sense.
Yeah, because this is also the boss that I will always remember this, where when they made that awful Sonic the Hedgehog 4 game, Sonic the Hedgehog 4 Episode 1 for the Xbox Live Arcade stuff, where I got to the end of that game, and it is just this boss, and it was like the cheapest feeling thing in the world, where they just, like, they didn't even bother to design a new final boss for that game. They just took the fucking robot from Sonic the Hedgehog 2, and I remember looking at that being like, well, this is the shit sundae on top of, or the shit cherry on top of the shit sundae, is you couldn't even be bothered to make your own boss fight. So that's something I always think about whenever I get to the end of Sonic the Hedgehog 2 now, is that feeling of getting to the end of Sonic the Hedgehog 4 Episode 1 and being like, oh, well, this was a giant waste of my fucking time.
Did you ever play Episode 2?
No, God, no. I mean, after that experience with Episode 1, why would I bother?
I mean, I remember you ranting about Sonic 4 Episode 1 being like one of our earliest podcast episodes. Like, maybe that wasn't even weekly stuff, because when did Episode 1 come out? I need to look this up. It was,
I mean,
that came out in 2010. Yeah. Oh my God, that is probably pre-weekly stuff podcast. Like, yeah.
Yeah, I think maybe it might have ended up being talked about in like a very early podcast, like in a slightly like, because I think we did a topic where we ended up talking about Sonic. I think I brought it up there. Yeah, because I definitely played the game like shortly after it was released, because I was excited, because that was the first 2D Sonic game they had made in a long time, and then it ended up being that. It certainly was, you know, it was not Sonic Mania. Sonic Mania is the actual Sonic the Hedgehog 4.
Right, because Mario got New Super Mario Bros. Around that time, and it was great, and everyone loved it. Mega Man got Mega Man 9 and 10, and people love those. If you like the early Mega Mans, people really like those games. And then Sonic got Sonic 4, and just like, what a fucking kick in the nuts to Sonic fans. You've got Mario here, Mega Man here, they're living it up with their new 2D games, and Sonic is just getting shit on. But Sonic did eventually get Sonic Mania, which is maybe the best of any of those.
Yes.
So, yeah.
Yeah, it all worked out in the end, but it was particularly insulting that they then bothered to call it Sonic the Hedgehog 4, and then they don't even give it its own end boss. You know, it's like it's just so cheap feeling of like, it's fine if you do a reference to it, because they use this boss. They like do a redone version of this boss at the end of Green Hill Zone in Sonic Mania. It's like, it's the same general like model or like look, but the mechanics of the fight are totally unique. That's totally fine. I don't mind you doing a reference to the last boss fight, the Sonic the Hedgehog 2. It's a very iconic boss fight. Like Sonic Generations does it. Like it's been used in reference in a lot of Sonic games since, because it's very iconic. But just completely replicating the boss fight from top to bottom is a bridge too far for me.
Yes, absolutely. Here's one thing we somehow, Sean, haven't talked about yet with Sonic the Hedgehog 2. It introduced Tails.
Yes.
How did we forget to mention that? We all love our boy, Miles Tails Prower. It's a great joke, and he's got 2 tails and he can fly. But I just think something that I've always loved about these 2D Sonic games where Tails is running behind you is I think there's something, it's such a genius little move to have a little buddy running around with you in these games. I think, like, Tails doesn't do a lot for you, and if you are going for getting all the Chaos Emeralds, you do not want Tails with you, because I learned the hard way, Tails fucks you up in those levels.
Yep.
I did do it. I got all 7 Chaos Emeralds with Tails running behind me, and it is really hard. It involved a lot of save scrubbing. With Knuckles, I was actually able to do it pretty naturally because I'd learned the patterns, and Knuckles is on his own. But no, it makes it extra hard. But I do just love kind of going through these levels with a friend there. I think there's something, more games should just give you a friend flying around with you. I think it's such a cool little move that makes the world feel that much more alive. And that's one of the things I've always loved about Tails.
Yeah, it's a great addition to the game because, as you say, even if you're just playing single player, it just like it makes it feel like it's more of a big adventure, right? That's just it's
Yes.
not just Sonic alone. He's got his friend, and outside of the special stages, where I'm pretty sure I don't think I've ever gotten Supersonic. I don't think I've ever actually tried to do Supersonic with Tails because I knew that he fucks you up. So I'm pretty sure when well, I know for sure when I did my big Supersonic run through all these games. I made sure to only pick Sonic for Sonic 2.
It's a real bitch. Like, because Tails in the main game kind of does his own thing, but in the other levels, Tails will mimic all of your moves, but like several seconds delayed. So you have to get either lucky or really learn those levels and plan ahead, and it sucks. It makes it very hard.
Yeah, but in the normal levels, he's just there with you, and every once in a while, you can get like an extra hit on the boss with him. He can pick up rings if they hit him, stuff like that. So it's just like a nice little extra bonus. And then of course you can also, while it is fairly janky because the camera obviously only follows Sonic, like you can do 2-player stuff with him, and it's not a like amazing co-op experience, it's not the game I would go to. I would go to something like a Streets of Rage 2 or something like that if you want to have a good co-op experience on the Sega Genesis. But if you want to play Sonic the Hedgehog and you've got a buddy over, like it's more fun than just sitting and watching someone play Sonic. You kind of can like sit and watch them play and then also do some stuff and kind of help out. They expand.
It's kind of like in Mario Galaxy or something where you can control the second Wiimote and like pick stuff up. It's that kind of 2-player.
Yeah, where it's not a full equal co-op. It's more of like it's a main person playing the game and then someone who's like kind of a helper. And then they do expand a lot on Tails' moveset for Sonic 3 and add his flying. And in that context, playing a Sonic and Tails co-op in Sonic 3 is like effectively playing a different game than just playing alone as Sonic, because now you can be Sonic and you can still fly cooperatively with Tails, and that's very cool. But for this one, it's more just kind of like a basic thing where everything he does is the same as what Sonic does. He has the same jump, all that. It's just he's got a slightly different aesthetic. And you can, if you want, you can play as Tails from all the way from the beginning if you select him in the options menu too. So it is a nice little thing where you can get a different little in splash screen, all that kind of stuff. So it adds just a little bit of extra variety to the whole game, and it also allows them to do the little like competitive mode, which is again not the most amazing multiplayer in the world on the Sega Genesis, but was a fun thing that adds additional value to the game and just makes it like a thing you can keep going back to with your friends.
Yeah, absolutely. So what else do we want to say about Sonic the Hedgehog 2 while we just, do this little loving retrospective on what a good little game it is?
I mean, it's just so good. Like, it's one of those, like, kind of, it's not necessarily, like, an absolutely perfect game of this. Is that, like, I do think there's stuff about Metropolis Zone in particular that I can criticize, although there's still a lot of stuff about that level I really love. But it has this kind of perfect game feeling quality to it, of that it's a game I can pick up whenever I want, I can play, and just have a great time with, whether I want to beat it, whether I want to just play it for a little bit. There are so many different ways in which you can play it, either like perfectionist, get the Chaos Emeralds, do all that, or just play it very casually. It's one of my favorite games. It's a game that's been with me for literally my entire life. And I'm very happy to always have it there. And now I've got it on my little Nintendo console that's right next to me, where there's always a little bit of a like a pang in my heart whenever I play a Sonic game on a Nintendo console. It took me a while to be able to play these Sonic Advance games on Game Boy Advance because it felt wrong. But I can play Sonic the Hedgehog wherever I want now.
It is so funny because I've like only ever played Sonic on Nintendo consoles, because I like met him on the GameCube. Like it's such a weird thing, I think, for people like just a little older, like with the Genesis, that like the game that made me and my brother want a GameCube was Sonic Adventure 2. Like, it's so crazy. Like, that and Smash Bros. Melee, that was, like, the game that we were, like, jealous other people had. We didn't know we didn't know what Sega, like, versus Nintendo, all that stuff, right? Of course, now I know it, and it is funny. Yeah. In terms of, how to play Sonic 2, obviously you can emulate it anywhere, and it's very easy to get on, Mac, PC, whatever, homebrewed 3DS. There are a bunch of releases of it out right now. Just to let you people know who are listening to this and want to go play Sonic 2, if you want to play it on a main console, I would point you, if you want to get one right now, to the Sega Ages version, which is on Switch and everything else. And it's a really nice remaster where or not remaster, but it's a very straight port. It's got the full game. It doesn't have slowdown issues. There is slowdown in Sonic 2 that's just part of the game sometimes, but it doesn't have additional slowdown. It doesn't have additional input lag, which the like Genesis collection, those always have a bunch of bad input lag. So don't play it there. It's got a bunch of wallpapers. It's got a bunch of presentation options. You can do smoothing. You can do the pixel art. You can do scan lines, whatever you want. And it's got Knuckles in Sonic 2, which not many of the ports actually have Knuckles in Sonic 2. You'd be surprised. So that is the best one out right now. They are eventually going to do this Sonic Origins collection, but we don't know when. They announced it last year. They haven't said anything more about it. They're finally going to have 3 and Knuckles in there somehow, which have not been re-released in a long time. But yeah, you can play it anywhere. I'm just in case people wanted to know where could I play it on my console, I would recommend the Sega Ages version. And if you have a 2DS, or a 3DS, I should say, there is also the 3D version, which I was going to recommend to you, Sean, and then I realized you only have a 2DS, not the 3D 3DS. And there is, for Sonic 1 and 2, a 3D port where they make the visual stereoscopic 3D. They also have that for Streets of Rage and some of the other Genesis games. And I have a couple of those, and they actually look pretty cool. Seeing all of the like levels of the game in 3D is kind of neat, but not essential. But those are all the good ways to play Sonic 2.
You could also Google Sega Genesis online and find a used Sega Genesis and then buy a Sonic the Hedgehog 2 cart for... I'm actually going to look this up now. I'm curious how expensive is a Sonic the Hedgehog 2 cart these days. Because it's always been a little bit more than just the like, I'll just like throw this down for whatever, even because... You know, anytime you're buying a used old video game, there's always a risk you're going to get something that doesn't actually work, which is one of the reasons why I don't want to spend something that's more than like a truly trivial amount of money for something I'm not going to be particularly confident in. And I just realized if you just type Sonic the Hedgehog 2 into the internet, you're going to get this movie a lot. So now I've got to be way more specific with my Google searches these days.
Well, Sean, I found a cart on eBay for $5 with free shipping.
I don't trust fucking eBay for this shit. That's always where
Well, where do you buy it?
So sometimes if you go through Amazon, you get your Amazon approved like used games that people or whatever. So you're actually going through like mom and pop shops that have it rather than just like some random motherfucker. So you can get you can get some for about $10 for like something that's not in great quality. So it's actually seems a bit cheaper than what I remember it being. Maybe I will buy a copy of Sonic the Hedgehog 2 and just have that on my Sega Genesis. Because why the fuck not?
All right. Anything else to say about Sonic the Hedgehog 2?
It's a good game. Is it a good movie?
It's a really good movie. It's like, look, is it a great like work of cinema that's going to live alongside Citizen Kane in the annals of history? No, I don't know why you would expect it to be that. It's a good. I mean,
that's what I was. If it's not that, I'm not going to see it. I'm waiting for the Sonic the Hedgehog movie that's going to supplant all of like film academia. It's going to be the new chapter 1 in every film textbook is Sonic the Hedgehog 2 is where it really started.
Yes. There was 120 years of prelude, and then we got Sonic the Hedgehog 2.
Yeah, there used to be these things called movies. Now we just call them Sonics.
Exactly. No, look. Sonic the Hedgehog 2, like the other movie, is fundamentally a Hollywood kids movie. And that means it's going to have some stuff in it that I just don't know how you avoid in a Hollywood kids movie. Like a lot of very lame dad jokes, frankly, that make pop culture references that are always, at a minimum, 10 years out of date. Just like always, there are no references to anything current in the world. It is at a minimum 10 years out of date, and sometimes they're very silly on that level, and you will groan. But I think, in general, they are in a good spirit, and I can groan through them or laugh alongside them and then get on to the good stuff. That stuff does not annoy me that much. Where it annoyed me in the first movies was when they did incessant product placement. Like, they made a lot of Olive Garden jokes that were very bad. They don't do that in this movie except to make fun of the Olive Garden jokes from the last movie, and I kind of liked that. So it does not have the bad product placement shit. But it has, your dumb dad jokes and stuff. It's got a little too much stuff with the humans. But, CGI is expensive. They're going to pad the runtime with scenes with dumb humans. I get it. You could cut probably 10 minutes of this movie with the humans in Hawaii where there's some weird scenes that are just not related to the plot that I would get rid of. Other than that, though, if you are a Sonic fan, if you have affection for the characters of Sonic, Tails, and Knuckles, I guarantee you will enjoy this movie. Like, they do... I mean, Tails is just Tails from the video games because it is Colleen O'Shaughnessy who's been voicing Tails since 2014. She is, I think, the best Tails voice we've ever had. And she is the best vocal performance in this movie because she's the only professional voice actor in the movie. And it turns out professional voice actors are really good at professional voice acting, Sean.
Yep.
And I still like the other ones. I will say, though, because it's Colleen O'Shaughnessy doing Tails, whenever she has a scene with Sonic, I was imagining what if this was Roger Craig Smith instead of Ben Schwartz, and my conclusion was always this would be a better movie. I like Ben Schwartz. He's a fun Sonic. I think it's a good characterization, but Roger Craig Smith is a professional voice actor and is better at this, you know? Idris Elba's Knuckles, though, is fantastic. They very much lean into the Idris Elba of it. They kind of... The Knuckles characterization in this movie sort of leans on some of the meathead stuff from Sonic Boom, combined with, like, he is specifically like an echidna warrior in this movie who does not sort of understand the world outside of, like... It's a little like Drax in Guardians of the Galaxy, which I think is a fun characterization for Knuckles. You know, he's very literal. But he's a hoot. Anytime he's on screen, everyone's laughing. Knuckles is great. He does some very cool stuff. They really invest in, like, the fucking cartoon design from the video game with Knuckles, like... Because, like, Sonic and Tails have the gloves and all of that stuff, too. But Knuckles just full-on has those big, stupid boxing gloves he has on in the games. And, like, you know, he's punching into walls and climbing up walls like he does in the game with his dumb boxing gloves on. And I love that kind of stuff. So I think with those three characters and the chemistry in between them, where it's obviously a friends to or an enemies to friends relationship, Knuckles does become their friend by the end of the movie, obviously. But he starts it working for Robotnik. I think all of that is super fun. So, like, if you like those characters, that's the thing they nail in this movie, and it's more than I would have ever expected from a Hollywood movie. Is, like, there are versions of Sonic, Tails, and Knuckles that feel like Sonic, Tails, and Knuckles. They even, like, I think they really nail, like, Tails as Sonic's friend in a very meaningful way. Like, that friendship feels, like, very fun and, like, lived in over the course of the movie, even though in this continuity they hadn't met before. I did realize, though, I was reading the storyline in the Sonic 2 instruction manual last night, and it is basically the same in the movie, where Tails noticed Sonic from afar during the events of the previous game or story, thought he looked cool, and then starts following Sonic around.
Yep.
That's basically what happens in this movie as well, except there's some interdimensional travel involved. But I like it. Tails has his inventions, and, like, are constantly using them to do cool things. So all of that is great. And then, within all of that, this game is just peppered with loving references to the games. And I am not always someone who will praise something because it referenced things I recognize, which, you know, is the Ready Player One, you know, school of criticism, right? But when it's Sonic and they're doing stuff like Sonic eats a lot of chili dogs in this movie. There you go. Thank you. I like Sonic eating chili dogs. They have, you know, Knuckles climbs up a wall, punching the wall like he does in the games. And I'm like, that they got the animation cycle for that just right. That's really funny to me. They have Eggman looking like other than him, Jim Carrey is thin and not like a big dude, but he's got the fucking handlebar mustache, he's got the stupid goggles, he's in like a little egg cart that he's riding around in for half the movie. They've got all of that. Great. The best reference in the whole movie to me is there's a scene where Sonic is underwater, he's having trouble breathing, bubbles come across, and he sucks them in with, like, the exact animation from the Genesis games, and I literally clapped in the theater. I don't know if anyone else got it, but that was like, I can't believe I saw this in a movie, all the way up to the movie ends with him going supersonic and having all the Chaos Emeralds, and they do a full supersonic scene. They make it anime as fuck. It's very fun. And he destroys a big mecha Eggman who is very clearly based on the robot from the end of the game, Sonic the Hedgehog 2. It's just a bunch of stuff like that where this movie was very clearly made by people who love the video games and wanted to do those video games some kind of justice on screen. It is still ultimately its own take on all of this. It is, you know, Sonic has his, like, human family and all of that stuff. And, you know, Jim Carrey is a little more Jim Carrey than he is Dr. Robotnik specifically. But Dr. Robotnik can be anything, so that's fine. But it works. It's a fun movie. It's got a lot of Sonic. It's just got a lot of heart where I really like the characters and the relationships between them. I think it's very funny. Sometimes the jokes are lame, but even when they're lame, there is kind of that dad joke quality where it's just this is the kind of thing Hollywood's going to do. But a lot of the humor, and I think it's a big improvement on the first movie in this regard, is so much of the humor is just character-based with Sonic, Tails, and Knuckles, and then Robotnik. And when you're doing that, there's a lot to draw on there. And look, they've been trying to make video game movies ever since we've been alive, basically, Sean. That Mario movie is like 93 or something.
Yep.
They've all been bad. They're always bad. I think Sonic the Hedgehog 1 was a good effort, good, solid little video game movie. This is the first Hollywood video game movie I've seen that really is hyper invested in, like, being the game in a fun, meaningful way, and feeling like if you like this property, if you want to see a Sonic movie because you like Sonic, you will like this movie for a lot of the reasons you like Sonic. And that just kind of warms my heart. I like seeing that. And it doesn't feel like anyone in the movie is slumming it. It feels like they're all having fun. Even like the humans who kind of have thankless jobs, like James Marsden. James Marsden is very game for just having conversations with a CGI hedgehog he cannot possibly see on the day on set, right? And he just has fun with that. And it just feels, and then everyone involved, the writing and directing and all of that, I think are having fun with the property. And, it's getting rewarded. It had a $70 million million opening weekend. And I hope that like paints a little bit of a picture for Hollywood of like the actual way to do a video game movie is not to run screaming from the video game property like you're fucking Uncharted or something. You have a version of Knuckles that's fun and give Idris Elba silly things to say and have him look cool and red and all of that shit. It's really not that hard.
Yeah, I mean, particularly with Sonic, it's like, Sonic is like much more of a multimedia property these days than it is just a video game property,
yes.
Right? Like, it is known as much for its cartoons, and in certain circles for the comic books as it is for the video games. And so, yeah, like, it makes sense that, like, this is, like, one of the few, or, like, the only thing that, like, is kind of able to breach through and be, like, sort of successful within its niche as technically a video game adaptation, because it's like, I mean, there's absolutely no reason why you wouldn't be able to make a good Sonic the Hedgehog movie, because it's Sonic the Hedgehog. Like, he's designed to work in a multimedia capacity. It's just like, how much can Hollywood resist its own awful like tendencies with adapting properties, and particularly for like children's movies, in order to like let it be enough of what it needs to be a good movie. It's not like Mario, where if you asked me to like conceptualize what a Mario movie is and come up with a pitch for it, I would say, fuck off, don't make a Mario movie, never make a Mario movie, what are you even talking about? Whereas if you ask me that for a Sonic movie, I could give you fucking 100 ideas for a good Sonic the Hedgehog movie, no problem. Like, that's easy. It's like, can you get like good people who care to actually make it? Like, this is a property that it should be no problem to make good movies for. And so it's very nice to see that the good guys have won on this one and have actually been able to like make what is this like sort of like new little movie franchise with Sonic the Hedgehog.
Yeah, and I think, they kind of approached this one almost like a superhero movie, in the sense of you've got the hero and the villain, and then a lot of cool, sort of guest characters and all of that stuff. It's a lot of fun, and it is not necessarily it's definitely not my favorite version of Sonic, but Sonic, as you say, is multimedia, and there's a lot of different ways Sonic can work and cannot work, and I think this is a good way Sonic can work, where it's just, it is, I do want to stress, these are movies for kids. Sometimes the ways I see these movies criticized are basically people mad that they're movies for kids, and I hate to break it to you, but Sonic is for kids. Yeah. Like, he's a little blue hedgehog mascot, and these are kids' movies, and I think that's fine. You all know that I do not love Jim Carrey as an actor, or a person, certainly.
Yeah.
But I will say, I think he is more fun in this movie than he is in the first one. He still would not be my first choice to do Robotnik. I think part of it is that this movie has so many more characters and fun things going on that Robotnik is in the movie proportionally much less, and who he has to bounce off of is stuff like Knuckles and more of the like fun characters in that regard. It's not just always Jim Carrey alone in a room going crazy. He's got some more fun things to bounce off of, and so all of that works a little bit more for me. I think it's proportioned out better in that sense. And I think compared to a lot of like Hollywood kids movies, I think this one has more of a like sort of genuine heart behind it that is like heartwarming and a little less overtly cynical. Now, some of that is weird because in the first movie they very much had the Sonic and his human buddy thing be more like kind of a like odd couple bromance between him and James Marsden. And in this movie, it is explicitly James Marsden is his adopted dad. Like, literally, part of it is at the beginning, Sonic doesn't call him dad, and at the end, he calls him dad. I don't quite know where that came from. Some of that is a little too on the nose. And I think where it comes from is them trying to position Sonic as, like, the kid in the audience stand-in, right? And I'm fine with that. I do think that, like, making them literal parents is weird, and I'm not sure where that comes from. But I did find it weird in a funny way, not in a this is a bad movie way.
Yeah, I was expecting it's like I had not heard the like Sonic calls him dad. Like, I don't know, that feels really weird. You know, obviously I haven't seen the movie, so I'm sure it makes a little bit more sense in context. But just hearing that statement is like, what the fuck?
It's, you know, it's weird. But look, Sonic has been through a lot of weird shit over the years. Sonic calling James Marsden dad is not even top 10 of weird things Sonic has gotten up to.
Does he make out with any human ladies in this movie?
No.
Oh, well, then
no,
I don't
not
need to
yet.
see it then.
Yeah, okay. They do also, in the credits scene, introduce Shadow.
Yes,
so
I heard this.
they introduce, I mean, there's so many little references. Like, there's a like unit of the military that's after them in this movie called Gun from the Sonic Adventure games. And at the end, you learn that Gun has had a top secret project that stretches back 50 years. And then they show like this thing rising out of the ground. And Shadow, we don't get a voice for him yet, but we do get the full 3D model of how Shadow looks in this world. And it's delightful. I really do like the CGI design they have gone with in both of these movies since they fixed it from that initial horror trailer. Where we had Lovecraftian Nightmare Sonic, and now we just have basically cartoon Sonic made 3D, and they did it with Tails and Knuckles, both look great. Tails flies his tails and flies, which is cool, all of that kind of stuff, and it looks like they've done the same thing with Shadow, and I'm excited to see what celebrity they cast as Shadow and what they do with that, because, you know, they have the world in a position where, like, Sonic 3 could be a fairly straight adaptation of Sonic Adventure 2 if they wanted to go that way. Like, I could very much see that working with, like, give Robotnik a fucking space laser, have them, like, bring in Amy and Rouge the Bat, and just go to town on it. I think you could have a lot of fun with that.
Like, now I'm just obsessed, though, with the idea of what if they did, like, the basic Shadow plot, which is he's, like, the ultimate life form made or whatever in, like, a lab and everything to be, like, a super hedgehog. But what if it was that, but instead of it looking like Shadow, it was just the original design of Sonic the Hedgehog from that trailer. And it's him going and having a conversation with the cartoony Sonic and being like, you faker, I'm not going to give this to any fake hedgehog. And that was what the next movie was.
If this movie had ended with, like, the thing rising out of the ground and in the cryosleep was the original design Sonic from the movie trailer, I would have died laughing. There would have been no podcast. It would have been the best fucking thing in the world. Oh my god.
Yes, it's like tragedy sweeps the nation as you know, millennials die in droves in the post-credit scene of Sonic the Hedgehog. As a, like, intense irony death. This is what doctors are calling it.
They need to at least have, like, a dream sequence in one of these movies where Sonic confronts his, like, Lovecraftian horror self with, you know, human teeth and all of that.
Yeah, should just be like the opening of the next movie is it starts and it's just that Sonic, and he's just going about, like, his morning routine, and then he looks into a mirror, he's like, oh god, and he, like, looks at his teeth, he looks at his eyes, like, ah, and he screams, and then Sonic wakes up in his bed, is like, oh, it was all a dream, and then it's just like the movie just goes on from there and never references it again.
Do you remember how, so in the current CGI models they use in the finished movies, they have the actual gloves on Sonic and everyone's hands, and they, like, I even like how they're rendered. They look like actual gloves. They have fabric. There's sometimes, like, a little seam in them and that kind of stuff. They look really good, but it's clearly the characters are in gloves, which has a whole history in minstrel shows and stuff, but very distant. We can talk about how way racism has gone through the whole world. That's technically where that comes from. But anyway, he's got the gloves on. But do you remember in the fucking trailer he just had white hands?
Yes.
Yeah.
Like, truly, it is like the most miraculous thing that ever happened. I mean, there is another universe where that first Sonic the Hedgehog movie came out with that design, and it's just the most titanic bomb of any movie of its kind ever, because nobody went to go see it, because nobody could physically stand to see it, because everyone was so horribly put off. Like it's like, I mean, truly, it is, because it's such it's like massive part of what the movie is the design of your main character. That's like, that was such a critical fucking thing that happened, that there would definitely be no Sonic the Hedgehog 2 in the world where that design went through for that movie. Like, everything about that movie could have been exactly identical with that design, and everyone would have vomited upon seeing it.
But imagine if, like, that movie had come out that way, and then they somehow did do Sonic 2. How on earth would you have done Tails and Knuckles in that style, right?
Oh, man. I wish I knew someone who is, like, a really good 3D modeler, because now someone needs to make that, right? Like, what is
Yes.
like, everything else look like in this horrifying design? Everyone just has weirdly white hands for no reason in this world.
Yes. What would Knuckles, like, because Knuckles is literally in, like, these big white boxing gloves. What are those? Does he just have, like, fucking tumors for hands?
Yeah, does he have, like, or is it just, like, is he like Wolverine, and instead of, like, spiky knuckles, it's like the bones are sticking out of the fucking front of his hand to make it, quote-unquote, realistic?
One of my favorite jokes in this movie, by the way, is it's a recurring thing where Knuckles will shake someone's hand and just break it because he has such big hands. He does it to Robotnik first, he does it to Sonic later. It's very funny. I like that as a little joke.
You should just, like, fist bump Sonic, and then just Sonic's hand is fucking gored and bloody. It's like, oh god! Oh, Jesus! And it's just like a major plot point in the movies. He can't use his hand for the rest of the film.
Alright, I think we're getting off track.
Now, this is exactly the topic we wanted to talk about at the beginning of this podcast, was randomly riffing on a movie that I haven't even seen.
Sonic 2 the game, masterpiece. Sonic 2 the movie, it's fun, it's a good time. If you like Sonic, it's worth seeing. Not a masterpiece, and that's okay. Anything else to say on today's show, Sean?
I like Sonic the Hedgehog.